Hello everyone, I know you watched this video to accompany you to sleep. So if you like this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, don't forget to tell me where you are from and what time you watched this video. Let's jump straight into the story. Story 1. On the morning of June 1st, 2018, a man in his 60s arrived at the Shenzhen District Police Station in New Taipei, Taiwan, to file a report. His last name was Gao, and he was there to report the disappearance of his daughter, Gao Nu. The story began the afternoon prior. Around 3 p.m. on May 31st, Gao Nu texted her younger sister, saying, "It's too hot. I'm going out to find a cooler place." That was the last piece of information anyone had about her. After that message, no one knew where she went or what she was doing. However, from the police's perspective, there wasn't much reason to panic yet. According to them, there were several reasons to stay calm. Firstly, it had only been over 10 hours since Gao Nu was last seen. Additionally, she was a 30-year-old woman, not a toddler who needed constant supervision. It wasn't uncommon for adults to forget their phones or lose touch temporarily, nor was it unusual for someone not to return home for a night. Still, as part of their duty, the police initiated a preliminary investigation after the report was filed. Initial clues seemed to support the police's assumption. They found a text message on Gao Nu's phone, revealing her plans to visit the Huashan area in Taipei on the afternoon of May 31st. Huashan is a well-known cultural and creative park, particularly popular among young people for camping, picnicking, and cultural events. According to the message, Gao Nu was planning to attend an art seminar there. With this information, everyone, including her father, felt somewhat reassured, thinking that she might have just lost track of time while having fun. However, the situation became alarming when 3 days passed without any sign of her. By this point, even the calmest person would start to worry. On the morning of June 3rd, the family rushed to the Taipei police station, which had jurisdiction over the Huashan area, to file another report about Gao Nu's mysterious disappearance. Once the disappearance had exceeded 72 hours, the police recognized that this case was more complex than it initially seemed. They quickly assembled 2 investigative teams. One team went into Huashan to search for any traces of Gao Nu, while the other reviewed all surveillance footage in the area, hoping to find clues about her whereabouts. The initial investigation yielded results when the police located several individuals had interacted with Gao Nu. Most notable was the testimony of a convenience store owner. According to her testimony, on the afternoon of May 31st, Gao Nu had stopped by her store to withdraw about $32 from the ATM. During the transaction, they exchanged a few words, and Gao Nu mentioned that the money was for tuition for some course. The store owner vividly remembered that Gao Nu appeared completely normal, with no signs of distress. Other visitors to Huashan also reported seeing Gao Nu. While this information didn't explain her disappearance, it confirmed that she had indeed reached Huashan. However, after investigating nearly all the art seminars held in the area on May 31st, no one had seen Gao Nu. The situation grew stranger as the police reviewed footage from all entrance and exit cameras from the time of the incident until then. The surveillance team found no information about Gao Nu's movements, suggesting that she vanished after leaving the convenience store. Given this scenario, the police could only come up with 2 hypotheses. Either Gao Nu was still somewhere in the Huashan area, or someone had managed to get her out of the area without being captured by the cameras. Both possibilities posed significant challenges for the investigation. Despite the growing mystery, the police shifted focus to investigating Gao Nu's personal life. They began looking for clues about her mental state or any recent unusual behavior, suspecting that her disappearance might have been impulsive, driven by psychological stress. While this shift in the investigation's direction seemed odd to some, it had its reasons. The police found that Gao Nu was a well-educated and compassionate young woman, passionate about geography and Taiwanese cultural history. Her kindness was evident in her efforts to raise funds for victims of the 2016 Kaohsiung earthquake. However, deeper scrutiny of Gao Nu's social media posts revealed other notable details, especially concerning her strained relationship with her family. For instance, she once shared a story from her college years. While preparing to return home for winter break, her wallet was stolen. Desperate, she had to ask her father for help, but instead of showing sympathy, he harshly criticized her. In addition to family troubles, Gao Nu faced difficulties in her post-graduation life. After experiencing several job failures, she expressed her frustrations on Facebook. Taipei feels like a monstrous city to me now. Every morning I wake up, I just want to cry. There's a voice inside me screaming to run away from here. Although she attempted to start fresh by returning to her hometown for work, she was soon bullied at her new job, isolated by veteran colleagues. Unable to bear the invisible pressures any longer, she eventually quit. Reflecting on the series of hardships and challenges she endured, it was easy to understand the mental toll Gao Nyo had faced over the years. This prompted the police to pay close attention to her psychological state during the investigation. However, these speculations were quickly dismissed by Gao Nyo's younger sister, her closest relative. She firmly told the police that while her sister had faced many setbacks in her career, those were all in the past. Currently, Gao Nyo's life was more stable, as she worked at a Japanese fashion store and had a good relationship with her manager. My sister has no boyfriend. Her life only revolves around work and home. It may be monotonous, but there's nothing to be upset about, the younger sister shared. Therefore, the idea that she might do something drastic is completely unfounded. As for the possibility that she had left home voluntarily, her sister pointed out one inconsistency. If she were planning to go somewhere, she would have at least taken her phone, right? Her sister's reasoning not only made the police reconsider their initial hypothesis, but also forced them to eliminate several other investigative avenues. They began analyzing each possibility. Given her job as a clothing store sales associate, Gauna's income was likely modest, making robbery an unlikely motive. Additionally, her lack of a romantic relationship ruled out a crime of passion, and her reclusive lifestyle made a revenge-driven murder implausible. Having ruled out all other possibilities, investigators were left with only one hypothesis. This might be a random homicide. Such cases are often the hardest to investigate and solve. If there was no footage of Gao Nyo leaving Huashan, why didn't the police thoroughly search the entire area? In fact, it wasn't that the police didn't want to search, but that Huashan has certain characteristics. The Huashan Creative Park is a venue for artists to develop their creativity and for non-profit organizations to host events. It serves as a hub for various artists, including theater groups, painters, wood sculptors, writers, filmmakers, and directors to showcase their talents. Their goal was to create a paradise for art enthusiasts, breaking free from traditional media, spatial, and ideological constraints. In 2016, they launched the 120 Prairie Autonomous Zone, obtained land from the Taipei government, and established the Huashan Creative Park. Thus, the place also became known as Huashan Prairie, or the Prairie Autonomous Zone. Hearing the term autonomous zone suggests that, unless absolutely necessary, the government usually refrains from intervening in the area. While investigators cautiously explored each hypothesis, Gao Nyo's family was desperate. Frustrated by the police's slow progress, they decided to take matters into their own hands by hiring a renowned search expert with a significant fee. This expert, Chen Xingwei, trained a reputable search dog team. One of his standout dogs was a Weimaraner with exceptional scent detection skills, earning it the nickname Star Dog in the rescue team. The dog was named Lin Jiling. However, despite having a star dog on their side, both the police and Gao's family had limited expectations. Heavy rainfall in Taipei during the incident days had likely weakened or erased human scent, significantly impacting the dog's search effectiveness. As expected, Lin Jiling found nothing during the first 5 hours at Huashan. Unexpectedly, when the search team reached a corner, the dog suddenly displayed unusual behavior, becoming extremely excited. Following its instinct, it rushed forward, stopping in front of a small wooden house called Yeji Chao Dang, where it began barking incessantly. Startled by the dog's strong reaction, the police didn't hesitate and immediately entered the house. As they ventured deeper inside, the dog's behavior grew even more intense. It not only kept barking, but also sniffed around continuously. The climax came when the dog discovered a bed in the bedroom. It jumped onto it and clung tightly, resisting any attempt to pull it away. This indicated that Gao Nyo had likely been in the wooden house, and may have slept on the bed the dog was clinging to. The police promptly questioned the owner of the wooden house, a man named Chen Baikian. However, when faced with police questioning, Chen seemed utterly surprised, even somewhat confused. He not only claimed not to know Gao Nyo, but also stated that he hadn't seen anyone matching her description recently. This left the police in a difficult position. On one hand, there was the unusual and strong reaction from the search dog, but on the other hand, there was Chen's firm denial. Legally, A dog's behavior alone wasn't sufficient grounds for a search warrant. Moreover, Chen's calm and cooperative demeanor raised no immediate suspicion. After some consideration, the investigators reluctantly withdrew, feeling frustrated. Naturally, with experience dealing with various criminals, the investigators weren't ready to accept Chen's story at face value. They immediately launched a thorough background check on him. The investigation's findings were alarming, suggesting that Gao Nyo's fate might be in grave danger. Beneath Chen's polite and calm exterior was a very different person, an experienced liar. During the investigation, the police discovered that Yeji Chaodang wasn't just an ordinary wooden house. It was actually an archery club. Chen wasn't only the owner, but he also claimed to be an indigenous Sedic tribe member and an archery instructor. On May 19th, in over 10 days before the disappearance, Gao Nyo, who was interested in indigenous culture, contacted Chen through Facebook. She had arranged an in-person meeting to interview him about indigenous culture while also experiencing archery lessons. Things started to make more sense. The art seminar Gao Nyo mentioned might have been this meeting, and her visit to the convenience store to withdraw money was likely to pay for the archery course. Given this evidence, Chen's testimony became increasingly suspicious. How could he claim not to know Gao Nyo when they had exchanged messages and planned a meeting? Clearly, something was off in his story. An unexpected development added more suspicion to the case. On June 2, 2018, a day after Gao Nyo disappeared, her younger sister accidentally sent a group message while checking her sister's phone, which had been left at home. As one of the contacts in her phone also received the message. His reaction, however, was peculiar. Instead of ignoring a mistaken message, he immediately called Gao Nyo's number saying, "Where have you gone? Your sister is looking for you." What did this statement suggest? It hinted that Chin might have already known about Gao Nyo's disappearance. To the experienced eyes of the police, this call signaled panic and anxiety. It seemed that the message from Gao Nyo's sister had rattled him, causing him to inadvertently reveal something. The reasons behind his unusual response were likely self-evident. Further investigations uncovered even more unsettling facts about Chen's true character. The man who claimed to be an indigenous Sedic was actually a former cadet of the Air Force Academy. After leaving the academy, he became a wandering delinquent, resorting to archery lessons as a means of income only when he ran out of options. His indigenous identity was merely a ruse to add an air of mystique to his business. Chen's personal life was even more shocking. Despite having a wife and children, he remained unfaithful. One woman was so outraged that she publicly accused him on social media, claiming that Chen had pretended to be single, got her pregnant, and then heartlessly abandoned her. These suspicious leads made the police increasingly certain that Gao Nyo had met with foul play involving Chen. In an effort to gather more evidence, they decided to return to Yeji Chaodang, this time bringing along Gao Nyo's sister for a face-to-face confrontation with Chen. When Chen faced the police this time, he remained unfazed. During the questioning, he even leisurely ate stinky tofu nearby, so relaxed that the police momentarily wondered if they might have suspected the wrong person. Bringing Gao Nyo's sister along, however, proved to be a wise decision. While Chen was trying to evade with vague excuses, the sister suddenly froze when she noticed a familiar laptop on the table. It was her sister's laptop. This discovery was a devastating blow to Chen's false composure. Sweat began to pour down his forehead. As the investigators intensified their questioning, he completely lost control and even bit one of the officers. While this act of violence shocked everyone present, it inadvertently provided an opening for the investigation. With a charge of assault, the police had sufficient legal grounds to detain Chen and continue the interrogation under better conditions. From experience, the police knew that once a suspect lost composure, their psychological defenses were close to collapsing. However, back at the station, Chen adopted a defiant stance, maintaining his innocence and refusing to admit to any wrongdoing. The standoff continued until the legal detention period expired, forcing the police to release him. The lack of sufficient evidence to detain a suspect is an unfortunate reality of legal proceedings, but is understandable. Yet, at this stage of the investigation, all signs pointed to one conclusion. Gao Nyo's disappearance was strongly connected to Chen. What happened next only strengthened that belief. Immediately upon being released from the police station, Chen's first action was to attempt an escape. He rushed back to the wooden house, gathered some essential items, and prepared to flee with a woman. Fortunately, Gao Nyo's sister and a family friend named Su Wenjian had anticipated this. They were hiding nearby, keeping an eye on the wooden house. Upon seeing Chen's escape attempt, they quickly alerted the police and tried to stop him. Confronted by this situation, the woman accompanying Chen, identified as Luo, suddenly became agitated and tried to block the police and family members. Her intention was likely to give Chen a chance to flee the scene. During the commotion, Su Wanjian suddenly shouted, "A girl has been missing for over 10 days. What have you done? You must have been battling your conscience all this time. But I am a man of faith, and in the name of the Bodhisattva, I hope that when you descend to hell, the Bodhisattva will forgive you. I beg you tell the truth." It's unclear whether Su's words struck a chord with Chen, or if he simply realized that escape was impossible. Either way, Chen abruptly stopped resisting and confessed to killing Gao Nu. As the police had suspected, Chen Buoqian's motive was sexual assault followed by murder. Initially, the plan was for Gao Nu to leave Huashan after learning about indigenous culture and completing her archery lesson. But Chen insisted on inviting her to stay for a dinner featuring indigenous dishes. Hearing the words indigenous dishes piqued the interest of the culturally curious Gao Nu, and she agreed. During the dinner, invited a few other archery students to join. Under the pretext of a warm welcome, they encouraged Gao Nu to drink heavily, leading to her passing out at the table. With his initial goal achieved, Chen's true nature emerged. After sending his friends away, he could no longer contain his dark desires. Believing that he could do as he pleased, Chen thought the night would unfold as planned. But fate was not on his side. Around 4 a.m. on June 1st, a Gao Nu suddenly woke up. Realizing the situation she was in, she fought back fiercely, trying to protect herself. In his desperation to prevent her screams from attracting attention, resorted to strangling her. Ultimately, Gao Nu died from asphyxiation. At this point, it was already a grave case of sexual assault and murder. However, what happened next was even more horrifying. Driven by a sick and incomprehensible mindset, Qin did not dispose of the body immediately. Instead, he chose to stay in the same room with Gao Nu's lifeless body for 3 days. Finally, unable to bear it any longer, he dismembered her body, cutting it into multiple pieces. He packed the parts into 7 bags and disposed of them in the Yangmingshan mountain area. Qin chose these locations for their strong sulfuric smell, which he believed would help conceal his crime. What was even more chilling was that when the police searched Yangmingshan for the remains, some parts were never found. It wasn't until much later during a search of Chen's house that police discovered some preserved human tissue samples from the victim. However, some body parts are still missing. Regarding the fate of the remaining parts, the police likely prefer not to imagine the worst possibilities. Even an experienced forensic expert named Chao Dakin, when interviewed about the case, expressed his outrage, describing Chen as a severe sociopath who was beyond rehabilitation. His judgment reflected the sheer barbarity of this criminal. Thus, when the case of Gao Nu was first reported, it immediately caught public attention. Aside from discussing Chen's cruelty, people focused on another issue, whether he had accomplices. There were 2 main reasons for this suspicion. First, the police could not locate Gao Nu's arm in Yangmingshan. When questioned, Chen appeared confused, pointing to several locations, but the searchers still couldn't find it. This led some to suspect that someone else had helped him dismember and dispose of the body, which would explain why he was unsure of certain parts' whereabouts. Second, according to Chen's testimony, he transported the body to Yangmingshan on a motorcycle. The problem is that the distance from Huashan to Yangmingshan is over 30 miles, and Gao Nu weighed over 220 pounds. Many regular motorcyclists found it unlikely that someone could manage to carry such a load under low-light conditions alone. Having help seemed more plausible. In fact, the police also considered this possibility. Unfortunately, there are few surveillance cameras in Yangmingshan Park, making it impossible to confirm whether Chen had accomplices. However, what no one expected was that these speculations would inspire Chen's own defense. During the trial in August 2019, he suddenly changed his testimony, claiming that he did not sexually assault or kill Gao Nu. He alleged that the real perpetrator was someone named Eric, who had threatened his family, including his young child, forcing him to take the fall. Furthermore, Chen claimed that his earlier confession was not voluntary, but coerced by Su Wenjian, the friend of Gao's father. Chen described Su as a thug who not only forced him to confess, but also threatened to hire someone to kill him if he didn't. However, how could Su have threatened Chen inside a police station when he wasn't even a police officer? How could he have managed to intimidate a suspect inside the station? Luckily, the Taipei District Court officials saw through Chen's outlandish claims. Regardless of how much Chen tried to twist the truth, on August 5, 2019, he was sentenced to death for premeditated murder. However, the case didn't end there. It took another unexpected turn. Chen Buoqian appealed the ruling, and shockingly he succeeded. On April 7, 2020, the Supreme Court ruled that Chen Buoqian still had a chance for rehabilitation and reduced his sentence to life imprisonment. The Gao family, understandably, could not accept this decision. Yet no matter how strongly they protested, it was all in vain. Despite receiving a reduced sentence, adamantly refused to pay any compensation. Enraged by Chen's defiance, the Gao family decided to sue the Taipei Urban Development Department. Their claim was that the department had issued a permit for the use of Huashan Creative Park, but failed to manage it properly, allowing criminals like Chen to operate there unchecked, which indirectly led to the tragedy. Consequently, the family sought compensation of about $485,000. Their claim was promptly dismissed by the lower court. The court ruled that Chen Buoqian was neither a government official nor had he been performing any official duties. Thus, there was no managerial negligence involved. The Urban Development Department only managed government officials, and Chen did not fall under their jurisdiction. Reflecting on the entire case, it's clear that it left behind a deep sense of injustice. On one side, a savage criminal was spared the death penalty, while on the other, the victim's family not only lost a loved one, but also received no compensation whatsoever. They were even denied emotional closure, as the courts repeatedly rejected their legitimate claims. Story 2. In Baotou, a mighty steel industrial center situated in the grasslands of Inner Mongolia, China. Late one night, the emergency center of Baotou No. 3 Hospital received an urgent call. On the other end of the line was a young woman's trembling voice, reporting that her husband had suddenly suffered a heart attack and was in critical condition. She desperately pleaded for medical personnel to come immediately. The address provided was an old apartment at No. 8, Youth Road 700, Kundalan District, less than 1.2 miles from the hospital. Within 5 minutes, the ambulance arrived at the scene. However, after examination, the doctors determined that the victim had already passed away. During the death certificate procedures, Dr. Zhang Xiaomei examined the body and made a startling discovery. When she lifted the shirt of the victim, a middle-aged man, she was shocked to find numerous bruises covering his body. These injuries were clearly caused by blunt objects, completely different from typical heart attack symptoms. Yet strangely, the wife continued to insist that her husband had died from a sudden heart attack. With unusual signs on the body, Dr. Zhang questioned the family about the origin of the bruises. However, she received only evasive answers, as if they were deliberately avoiding the truth. Sensing something sinister about the death, Dr. Zhang immediately reported the case to the police upon returning to the hospital. Upon receiving the report, the Kundalan District's major crime unit quickly arrived at the scene. Entering the dark, damp apartment, the detectives found the victim's body already dressed in funeral clothes and laid out ceremonially in the middle of the room. Notably, funeral home staff were already present, preparing to take the body for cremation. This struck the police as highly suspicious. Why would the family rush to arrange the funeral less than an hour after the ambulance had left? What were they trying to hide? To clarify the situation, the Baotou police asked the funeral home staff to leave and split into 2 teams. One team took the body to the medical examiner's office for autopsy, while the other remained at the scene to collect evidence and take witness statements. The victim was quickly identified as Zhao Xiuguang, a 53-year-old wealthy businessman who was well known in the local iron ore industry. At the scene were 3 other people besides the victim. The young woman who had called for emergency services was Sun Ji, Zhao's wife. According to Sun's account, everything happened when her husband was walking down the stairs and suddenly had a heart attack, collapsing with blood streaming from his nose. She said she was about to get a towel to clean him up when, in just moments, he fell into a coma. In a panic, Sun rushed to call emergency services. However, when questioned more closely about her husband's condition before the alleged heart attack, the young woman could only bow her head and sob uncontrollably, unable to speak. The other 2 people present were a young couple, Lu Zhenzhuan, age 21, also from Baotou, and his girlfriend Kei Ying, age 20, originally from Hunan province. Strangely, Kei was crying even more hysterically than Sun, the victim's wife. When police questioned them about their relationship with Zhao, both remained silent. Why were a middle-aged married couple and a young couple together in this old apartment? What connection did they have to Zhao's death? To uncover the truth, the police took all three individuals to the station for questioning, while another team continued examining the crime scene. That evening, the autopsy results revealed that Zhao's body had multiple injuries caused by blunt force trauma from what appeared to be a stick or hammer, particularly around the neck area. There were also ligature marks on his neck, arms, and legs. The cause of death was determined to be multiple broken ribs, leading to internal bleeding and multiple organ failure. These autopsy findings completely contradicted Sun's story about her husband dying from a heart attack. What had driven the young wife to conceal the true cause of her husband's death? And what role did Lu and Kay play in this mysterious case? At the police station, Lu was the first to break the silence. He confessed to killing Zhao with a hollow plastic pipe, but insisted he didn't know the victim personally and had only acted to protect his girlfriend. According to his statement, that afternoon when he visited his girlfriend's apartment, he walked in to find Zhao sexually assaulting Kay. In a fit of rage, Lu claimed he pulled Zhao away and struck him with the pipe. However, Lu maintained that he only hit him a few times and never expected Zhao to be so frail that he would die from the blows. Lu's testimony was corroborated by Kay, the alleged victim of the assault. She told the police she worked as an insurance agent, and Zhao was a client she had met only 2 months prior. According to Kay, Zhao wasn't just any wealthy businessman, he was a prominent figure in the local iron ore industry. However, from their very first meeting, she had noticed his lecherous nature. Zhao had repeatedly made inappropriate advances, even suggesting she could live an easier life instead of working hard selling insurance. Kay claimed that in hopes of securing lucrative insurance contracts from Zhao, she had endured his inappropriate advances. However, her tolerant attitude only made him more aggressive. On the evening of June 1, 2013, using insurance business as a pretext, Zhao suddenly visited Kuei's apartment. He brought food and a bottle of liquor, clearly intending to get the young woman drunk to carry out his sinister plan. Under pressure, Kuei reluctantly had a few drinks. While she was tipsy, Zhao allegedly took advantage of her. Shortly after, Kuei's boyfriend arrived to confront Zhao and demand compensation, promising to keep the matter quiet. However, what began as a teaching lesson ended in death. Now that Zhao was gone forever, there was no way to verify whether Lu and Kay's statements were true or false. To prove their innocence during the investigation, Lu and Kay provided the Baodu police with a handwritten note bearing what appeared to be Zhao's signature. The note read, "At approximately 10:30 p.m. on June 1, 2013, I took advantage of a young woman named Kay Yen. I accept full responsibility for my criminal actions." In addition to this confession note, Lu also produced a voice recorder. On the recording, a voice believed to be Zhao's could be heard admitting to the crime. After investigation, the Baodu police confirmed that both the handwritten note and the voice recording were indeed Zhao's. However, they weren't quick to conclude that Zhao had actually committed the alleged assault, considering the possibility that he had been forced to make these confessions. Moreover, there was another suspicious aspect to the case. While the autopsy showed Zhao died from external trauma, Sun had initially claimed he died from a heart attack and falling downstairs. Why would she lie? At the police station, Sun remained in a state of extreme distress, only able to sob uncontrollably without speaking. To dig deeper into the case, investigators decided to visit Sun's family home. Through her mother's account, a tragic story began to unfold. Sun had married Zhao in late 2010, when she was just 26 and he was 51, even older than her father. Although Zhao was a wealthy iron ore tycoon, Sun's family couldn't accept the huge age gap between them. They strongly opposed the marriage, but Sun insisted on her choice. Eventually, her parents reluctantly gave in. In the early days of their marriage, Sun would often boast to her parents about her luxurious life, the mansion, luxury cars, and material comforts. However, this happiness was short-lived. Less than a year later, she moved back to her mother's home. Only then did her mother learn that Sun and Zhao had secretly separated. However, Sun kept the reason for their separation private, as if hiding some unspeakable truth. The police patiently investigated the marriage and finally got Sun to open up. Through tears, Sun revealed that she both feared and hated Zhao. After just a few months of marriage, her husband had become a completely different person, treating her like a servant in their home. The tragedy didn't end there. Sun had accidentally discovered countless flirtatious text messages between Zhao and other women, including evidence of secret affairs. Enraged by her husband's betrayal, Sun once lost control and confronted Zhao in a heated argument. To her shock, instead of showing remorse, her elderly husband responded with physical violence. After this incident, completely devastated by the marriage, Sun packed her bags, left their luxurious villa, and was determined to get a divorce. However, the case still held many mysteries. Why was Sun present at the scene when Zhao met his fate? According to Sun's statement, on the afternoon of June 2, 2013, the day before Zhao's death, she received a call from her husband's phone number. Initially, Sun thought Zhao wanted to discuss divorce arrangements. But surprisingly, the angry voice on the other end belonged to a young man, none other than Lu Jinjuan. Lu told Sun about how Zhao had allegedly assaulted his girlfriend, and demanded her presence to resolve the compensation issue. When Sun arrived at the rental apartment, she found Zhao tied up. Trapped in a desperate situation and fearing Lu and Kay would report him to the police, Zhao offered to pay 1 million yuan to keep the matter quiet. At first, Sun thought her husband had simply called to borrow money. However, Zhao then revealed a devastating truth. All his assets, from properties to businesses, had long been transferred to his first wife and daughter. He now had nothing left but debts. The reason he called Sun was to ask her to advance the 1 million yuan compensation payment. Faced with this bitter truth, Sun lost control. In a fit of rage, she grabbed a nearby plastic pipe and began beating Zhao repeatedly. Lu, at not getting any compensation, joined in venting his anger on the helpless man. By the afternoon of June 3rd, the situation took a turn for the worse when Zhao suddenly fell into a coma. When medical personnel pronounced Zhao dead, Sun was stunned. Remembering her own blows to Zhao's body, she realized she would face legal consequences. In panic, Sun, along with Lu and Kay, fabricated the story about Zhao dying from a heart attack and falling downstairs. Initially, the statements from Sun, Lu, and Kay seemed to align perfectly. The apparent truth of the case emerged. After allegedly assaulting Kay, Zhao was beaten to death by his wife and the victim's boyfriend in a fit of rage. However, was it really that simple? An unexpected discovery at the crime scene would turn the case in an unforeseen direction. During a thorough search of the rental apartment, detectives found a suspicious white plastic bag hidden in a corner of the balcony. Inside were a wooden stick, 2 pieces of rope, and a plastic pipe. Forensic experts confirmed these were the weapons Lu had used to injure Zhao. However, what particularly caught the investigators' attention was a quartz wall clock also found in the plastic bag. This made no logical sense. Normally, the clock would be hanging on the wall. If Lu was only trying to hide weapons, there would be no reason to remove and hide the clock unless it was somehow connected to the crime. The technical experts conducted a detailed examination of the clock and made a crucial discovery. The number 6 on the clock face was hollowed out, concealing a tiny hidden camera. The camera was ingeniously disguised, clearly intended for secret recording. From this clue, investigators deduced there must be associated recording equipment. Sure enough, when they continued searching the apartment, they found a laptop hidden under the bed in the bedroom. The computer contained secretly recorded footage, showing intimate moments between Zhao and Kuei. These images shocked all the officers present. Initially, investigators suspected Zhao might be a pervert who secretly filmed women for his own gratification. This theory seemed to align with Kuei's earlier testimony about his lecherous nature. However, several inconsistencies remained in this hypothesis. If Zhao had installed the camera, why would Lu and Kuei, after discovering it, help him hide the evidence? Moreover, the apartment was rented by Kuei, not owned by Zhao. If he wanted to secretly film someone, he could have easily done so in his own home or a hotel room. Why go through the trouble of installing a camera in Kay's apartment, which was both risky and complicated? These mounting irregularities led investigators to realize this case was far from simple. They strongly suspected Lu and Kay were lying. Under intense interrogation, Lu finally revealed a shocking truth. According to Lu's new testimony, while the intimate encounter between Zhao and Kay did occur, it wasn't forced as they had previously claimed. The entire incident was an elaborate scheme designed to extort money from Zhao. The plan was executed in stages. First, directed Kuei to play the role of an innocent girl to gain Zhao's trust. Then, Kuei would pretend to be drunk, creating an opportunity for Zhao to take her to the bedroom in the pre-prepared apartment. Lu had previously installed the hidden camera in the wall clock. Throughout the encounter, Kuei merely had to act convincingly, while Zhao fell completely into their trap. With the secretly recorded video, they believed Zhao would have no choice but to pay the blackmail money. The investigators were astounded by the cunning sophistication of this young couple. But what about Sun? Why was she at the scene? Why did she collaborate in Lu and Kei's deception? The police suspected Sun played a crucial role in this case. However, faced with her continued silence, they couldn't find any leads until another mysterious detail discovered at the truth. During their investigation, detectives found a piece of paper tucked in the living room sofa. Based on its contents, it appeared to be a promissory note written by Zhao to Sunday. Handwriting analysis confirmed it was indeed Zhao's writing. Significantly, the note was dated June 2, 2013, coinciding with when Sun, Zhao, Lu, and Kei were all present at the apartment discussing compensation. The note stated that before their marriage, Zhao had borrowed 1 million yuan from Sun and promised to repay both principal and interest by June 15, 2013. If overdue, Zhao would pay monthly interest of 10,000 yuan, about $1,400, until the debt was fully repaid. Notably, the interest rate specified in the note was 4 times higher than standard commercial lending rates at the time. While the overall content of the note seemed questionable, the terms regarding interest rates and penalties were written with unusual precision and clarity. This detail led investigators to suspect that the document wasn't hastily written by Zhao under duress, but had likely been prepared in advance by Sunday. According to Sun's initial statement, she came to the apartment to help resolve her husband's compensation issue. However, rather than helping Zhao out of his predicament, she forced him to sign a promissory note for 1 million yuan. This made police question Sun's true motives. During interrogation, Sun claimed the 1 million yuan mentioned in the note was money she had lent to Zhao before their marriage, though without any documentation. She said that after they were married, she had repeatedly asked for repayment, but Zhao refused. This time, with Zhao in trouble and needing her help, Sun saw an opportunity to force him to acknowledge the debt. When faced with police questioning, Sun showed no remorse. She calmly admitted that because she still harbored hatred for her husband, she not only didn't try to stop Lu from beating Zhao, but actually felt satisfied watching it. Sun thought that in his desperate situation, Zhao would have to yield, making it the perfect opportunity to recover her supposed 1 million yuan. However, the police were skeptical about Sun's financial capacity. Through multiple interviews with Sun's family, her mother had revealed their difficult financial circumstances. With an annual income of only 40,000 to 50,000 yuan, about $5,600 to $7,000, it seemed impossible for Sun to have possessed 1 million yuan to lend. At this time, Sun awkwardly said that it was the money her ex-lover gave her before they broke up. According to Sun, she met her ex-lover by chance and her family did not know about it. She herself did not want to mention this again. Before leaving Baotou City, her ex-lover left Sun 1 million yuan in cash. This money was hidden in a teddy bear, and Sun did not know at first. It was not until she brought the bear home that she was surprised to discover that there were 10 stacks of money inside, each stack of 100,000 yuan. At this point, you must have realized that Sun's statement had many contradictions. A teddy bear containing 1 million yuan in cash must be very heavy. 100 yuan weighs about 0.035 ounces, so 1 million yuan would weigh about 22 pounds. How could a girl like Sun bring a teddy bear weighing more than 22 pounds home without the slightest suspicion? Sun's obvious lies only made the case more complex. The Baotou police were convinced that darker secrets lay behind these false statements. To uncover the truth, they decided to expand their investigation, delving deeper into Sun and Zhao's social relationships. During previous interrogations, Sun's mother had revealed that her daughter had to lower herself to marry Zhao. However, Zhao's family had a completely different perspective. Zhao's sister insisted that Sun had married her brother purely for money, claiming there was never any real affection between them. According to her, from the day Sun became her sister-in-law, she had never once cooked a meal for her husband. Zhao's family firmly denied all rumors about him having affairs or keeping mistresses. In fact, Zhao's sister counter-accused Sun of being the unfaithful one in the marriage, claiming she was the one having an extramarital affair. Following this lead from Zhao's family, investigators dug deeper and made a shocking discovery. Sun was indeed having an affair with a younger man. And surprisingly, her lover was none other than Lu, one of the primary suspects in the murder case. When examining Sun's phone, investigators not only found Lu's number in her contacts, but also uncovered a crucial piece of evidence. On the evening of June 1st, 2013, Sunday had sent Lu a telling message. "Everything is going according to plan. Just say he took advantage of you, and remember to save the video." This text message exposed the dark truth behind the case. Sun was actually the mastermind pulling all the strings. So what was the real story? It all began in May 2010, more than 3 years before the murder. After divorcing his first wife, married Sunji, a woman 26 years his junior. However, within 6 months of living together, Zhao began showing strange behavior, frequently staying out all night. Although Zhao could provide Sun with a wealthy lifestyle, he looked down on her because of her poor family background. According to Sun at home, would constantly demand massages from her. If she did anything wrong, he would immediately beat and verbally abuse her. As a result, Sun's body was often covered in scars. What Sun found most unbearable was Zhao's constant texting with other women. Suspecting her husband of infidelity, she repeatedly asked for a divorce. But each time Zhao would angrily respond, "If you want a divorce, fine, but you'll leave with nothing. Don't even think about touching the Zhao family's money." Being betrayed by her husband and unable to claim anything in a divorce left Sun feeling deeply resentful. By the end of 2012, Sun decided to file for divorce and demand compensation, citing her husband's infidelity. However, her lawyer's advice gave her pause. To win the case, she would need concrete evidence of her husband's affairs. Without proof, the court would have no basis for judgment. Determined to find evidence of her husband's infidelity, in March 2013, Sun approached a computer repair shop where she met Lu, a young technician. For 200 yuan, about $28 per day, Sun hired Lu as a private detective to secretly monitor and gather evidence of Zhao's misconduct. However, after more than 2 months of surveillance, Lu couldn't find any evidence of Zhao's alleged affairs. Ironically, during their work together, Lu and Sun developed romantic feelings for each other. According to Lu's confession, their relationship began purely physical, initiated by him and readily accepted by Sunday. Over time, their affair grew more passionate. The deeper Sun fell into this illicit relationship, the more determined she became to escape her marriage with Zhao. About a month and a half before the murder, Sun devised an intricate plan to lure the tiger from the mountain. She decided to set up a trap to obtain evidence of her husband's infidelity. To execute this scheme, Sun needed an actress to play the bait. She described her ideal candidate to Lu, a young, beautiful, tall woman with fair skin, aged between 25 and 28. After some searching, Lu found the perfect candidate, Kei Yen, who would later pose as an insurance agent. In reality, Kei wasn't an insurance agent, nor was she Lu's girlfriend, as they had claimed. She was actually a massage parlor worker Lu had recruited from a local establishment. To persuade Kei to participate in the plan, Sun made an attractive offer. She promised to pay 5,000 yuan, about $700, after completing the mission, and would help Kei establish her own business. On May 7, 2013, following Sun's instructions, Kei rented a 2-bedroom apartment to set their trap. Lu secretly installed recording equipment inside the wall clock in the bedroom. To approach their target, Kei played the role of an enthusiastic insurance agent, frequently calling and flirting with Zhao. However, despite Kei's 3 attempts to make contact, Zhao remained cautious and hadn't taken the bait. At this point, Sun decided to change tactics. She told Kei to suggest meeting in person to discuss business. At the mention of a face-to-face meeting, the supposedly lecherous Zhao immediately agreed. After several meetings, Zhao's intention to seduce Kuei became increasingly apparent. So on the afternoon of June 1st, 2013, Sunday, Lu and Kuei decided to spring their trap. According to plan, Kuei called Zhao, pretending it was her birthday, and inviting him to her apartment for a private chat. Faced with such an enticing invitation, Zhao immediately accepted. As anticipated, Zhao fell into their trap and became intimate with Kuei. Right after, Lu and his accomplices burst in, with Lu pretending to be Kuei's boyfriend catching them in the act. Sun, the mastermind behind this performance, also appeared, pretending she had received a call from Zhao and joining the compensation negotiations as a family member. However, things didn't go as smoothly as they had planned. Zhao continuously resisted, deliberately stalling when forced to write a confession and record an admission. Sun recalled that Zhao wrote extremely slowly intentionally made spelling mistakes, and even blew his nose on the paper. After being forced to rewrite multiple times, Sun began losing patience. Sun began physically attacking Zhao. As time passed, both Sun and Lu increasingly lost control, their blows becoming more and more brutal. For over 40 hours, from the evening of June 1st until the afternoon of June 3rd, Zhao was denied food and water, enduring only continuous savage beatings. By the time Sun and Lu realized the gravity of the situation, it was too late. Zhao had fallen into a critical condition beyond medical help. Faced with irrefutable evidence, all three suspects finally confessed to their crimes. Sun Ji and Lu Jinjuan were identified as the main conspirators, while Cui Yen was charged as an accomplice. All were prosecuted for intentional homicide and extortion, facing severe legal punishment. Ironically, the hidden camera, their tool intended for blackmail, became the crucial evidence that sealed their fate. A miscalculation none of them had anticipated. This was an intricate case with multiple layers of deception. The three perpetrators had woven a complex web of lies, making the truth extremely difficult to uncover. If Dr. Zhang hadn't promptly alerted the police, if the investigators hadn't persistently pursued seemingly minor clues, perhaps the truth would have remained buried forever. A wealthy and successful businessman like Zhao Shiguang met his end in pain and humiliation. The puppet master behind it all was his young, beautiful wife. Perhaps from the very beginning, the marriage between Sun Ji and Zhao Shiguang was doomed to fail, as it was built entirely on calculation and exploitation rather than love. Story 3. The case I'm about to share with you is one that has stirred significant controversy. Public opinion on whether the suspect is guilty or not is split into two camps, with neither side able to persuade the other. It's similar to the famous O.J. Simpson case you've probably heard about. Although this story is a bit lengthy, its unfolding is incredibly thrilling and captivating. Each of us may find our own answer in the details. The story takes place in a small town in the south of France. Beautiful place called Mugan, located about 4 miles from the city of Cannes. This town sits on a hillside, and on a smaller hill to the west lies a luxurious 3-story villa with elegant white-gray walls contrasting with red roof tiles. The crime occurred here, in a spot that truly exemplifies a high-quality lifestyle reserved for the elite. The villa's owner, Ghislaine Marchal, is 65 years old. After her husband passed away, she inherited a substantial fortune and enjoyed a comfortable life. She has a son who works far away and rarely comes home. She had been living alone in this luxurious villa for nearly 4 years, relishing the serenity of her retirement. However, following a recent event, her family has garnered national attention. On the evening of Monday, June 24, 1991, the Mugan police received a distress call. The caller, a woman named Erica, reported that her close friend, Ghislaine, had been missing since the previous day with no trace found at her residence. Deeply worried that something terrible might have happened, she asked for police assistance in the search. Upon receiving the report, the police quickly headed to Gislaine's villa to assess the situation. This was a luxurious villa on the western side of town. 3 people were waiting for the police upon arrival. The caller, Erica, along with Colette and Pascal, all close friends of Gislaine. Erica explained to the officers that she and Gislaine were very close, often sharing afternoon tea together. The previous day, Sunday, at 11:48 a.m., they had spoken on the phone. Ghislaine had just finished bathing and invited Erica over for lunch the next day. Erica happily accepted, but Ghislaine mentioned she was busy cooking for an upcoming guest, so they only chatted briefly before ending the call. The conversation lasted just 2 minutes. Erica continued, explaining that at 11:30 a.m. this morning, she arrived at Ghislaine's house as planned and rang the doorbell, but no one answered. She tried calling the house phone, but there was still no response. This was very unusual. Ghislaine never canceled plans without informing her, even in case of an emergency. Erica began to feel uneasy. Around this time, Colette also arrived, mentioning that she and her husband had been invited for lunch at Ghislaine's house the previous day at 1:30 p.m., but when they arrived, no one was home and there was no answer to their calls. They left after waiting a bit, since they had other obligations that afternoon. Later, around 6 p.m., Colette grew more concerned and drove alone to Ghislaine's house again. She rang the bell, but still received no response. She waited for a while, thinking Ghislaine might have had an urgent errand, but after staying until it was dark with no sign of her friend, she decided to return today to check again and happened to meet Erica. The two discussed the situation and then climbed over the gate to get into the yard. They pressed their faces against the villa's windows to look inside, but couldn't see anything unusual. Since Ghislaine lived alone and was elderly, they worried that she might have had an accident in the house, like a fall, with no one around to help. Thinking this, they contacted a mutual friend named Pascal, who managed a security company. After learning of the situation, Pascal arrived with a security officer. Together, they managed to unlock the main door of Ghislaine's house. They found the key still in the lock on the inside of the door. Once inside, everything was pitch dark, all the windows were locked, and the home security system had not been activated. A breakfast tray remained on the kitchen counter, showing no sign of an intruder. Next, they went to Ghislaine's bedroom, where the curtains were drawn open and the bed was unmade, with a pair of glasses and a newspaper on it, as if Ghislaine had just gotten up. However, despite searching everywhere in the house, they could not find any trace of her. Shortly afterward, Ghislaine's private doctor, a 74-year-old, arrived and joined the search. They thoroughly checked the entire villa and found some jewelry and an open handbag in the bedroom closet, but there was no cash inside. Aside from this, they found nothing more. In this urgent situation, Erica called the police for assistance. The missing person, Ghislaine, age 65, was born into a wealthy French family and had one sister. She led a privileged life from an early age and received an excellent education. Her father was a businessman who managed multiple enterprises and had participated in the resistance movement during World War II, ultimately passing away in exile. As an adult, Ghislaine married and had one son, though her marriage was not a happy one. She divorced her first husband and raised her son alone. In her youth, Ghislaine was beautiful and had no shortage of admirers. She later met her husband, a successful businessman who ran a well-known automotive equipment company. After marrying, they lived happily and comfortably. However, their happiness was short-lived as her second husband passed away from a severe illness, leaving Ghislaine deeply heartbroken. She had no further romantic relationships after that. After inheriting her husband's wealth, Ghislaine became a wealthy single mother. She then took her son to Switzerland, where they lived for a time. Once her son reached adulthood and began living independently, Ghislaine returned to France, where she built a villa in the town of Mugen, and has lived alone there ever since. The police thoroughly searched the main building, but found nothing of note. Upon stepping outside, they noticed a small guest house nearby and asked the homeowner's friends if they had checked it. The friends mentioned that there was a basement under the guest house, but they had never been inside and didn't know what it contained. Hearing this, the police decided to investigate the basement. They followed an exterior staircase down to the basement, where they encountered a metal door. They attempted to push it open, but it was locked. Deciding to break the lock, they eventually managed to unlock it. But oddly, the door wouldn't fully open and could only be pushed open a small amount. The police realized something was blocking the door from the inside. After another attempt, they managed to widen the opening slightly, but they still couldn't see what was beyond. One officer reached through the gap and felt a folding bed positioned just behind the door, with the bed's frame obstructing the door from opening. The officer attempted to move the bed, but couldn't budge it. Additionally, there was a metal pipe and a wooden plank wedged tightly in the corner between the metal door and bed, blocking the door's movement. The officer reached through again, trying to kick the metal pipe and wooden plank loose, but they were wedged firmly. During this effort, deep scratch marks were left on the floor. Fortunately, they were eventually able to dislodge the obstructions. The officer then lifted one end of the folding bed, gradually pushing it upright while opening the door. After some time, the basement door was finally opened. Inside, it was pitch black and the air was heavy with a musty smell. Feeling around, an officer found the light switch and turned it on. A hallway stretched out before them, with a wine cellar on the eastern side. Walking down the hallway, they reached a spacious room. Inside, 8 old plastic containers were lined up, filled with crushed stones. The room also contained a hand cart and various miscellaneous items. Nearby, they quickly spotted a set of dentures lying beside the plastic containers. On the floor were 2 paper bags and a pair of large rounded scissors. The eerie atmosphere gave everyone a sense of foreboding. A few officers continued deeper into the basement and found a boiler room with its door ajar. Upon entering, they were met with a scene that stunned everyone present. Ghislaine, the 65-year-old homeowner, lay face down on the floor near the boiler. Her arms raised above her head with her hands together and her legs slightly apart. She wore only a black and white striped bathrobe, which was pulled up above her waist, stained with blood. Her right foot was in a slipper, while the left slipper lay nearby. The entire scene was deeply unsettling and sent chills through those who witnessed it. Based on the scene, the metal door was the only entrance to the basement. When the police arrived, the door was locked with a folding bed blocking it from behind, preventing anyone inside from escaping. The entire basement had effectively become a sealed room. Upon hearing the news from the police, Ghislaine's longtime friends broke down in tears. They described her as a gentle person with no enemies, respected by everyone around her. It was unimaginable to them that she could encounter such a horrifying incident in her own home. Forensic examiners arrived on the scene one by one to carry out their work. The police conducted a thorough investigation of the basement and soon discovered something unbelievable. On the white wooden door leading to the wine cellar, there was clearly written Omar Matu, translated as Omar killed me. The chilling part was that the letters were tilted, neat, and legibly written about 3 feet off the ground. There were also blood smears at the bottom of the wooden door near the floor. Similar letters were found on the boiler room door, though much fainter and difficult to decipher compared to the writing on the wine cellar door. Technical specialists analyzed each letter and discovered a phrase, albeit incomplete, which seemed to connect with the writing on the wine cellar door, suggesting some kind of link. Although the letters were handwritten, the fingers slid quickly while writing, making it impossible to extract fingerprints. This meant there was no way to prove whether Ghislaine had written it herself or if someone else had. The victim's hands were covered with bruises, her finger joints were fractured, and the middle finger on her left hand was nearly torn. From the scene, it appeared that someone named Omar was involved in all of this. Through their investigation, the police found that Omar was no stranger but, in fact, Ghislaine's gardener, a 29-year-old Moroccan national. Ghislaine's friend Erica informed the police that Omar was a straightforward, honest person who had worked for Ghislaine for a long time. He was hardworking and trustworthy, and Ghislaine had a great deal of confidence in him. Erica recalled that whenever she visited Ghislaine's home, she would often see Omar, who, despite being a manual laborer, was always neatly dressed and presented himself with the appearance of a gentleman, leaving a good impression on her. She found it hard to believe that someone so diligent and respectable could be involved in this case. The next day, the police began searching for Omar. They first went to his home, but no one was there. After speaking with neighbors, they learned that he had gone with his family to Toulon, over 60 miles away, to celebrate Eid al-Adha. This is one of the principal holidays in Islam, during which people dress in their best clothes, attend prayer services, gather for recitations and honor deceased family members. Families with the means often host a grand feast, inviting relatives and friends. After receiving this information, the police went to Toulon and eventually located Omar, arresting him on suspicion of murder. Omar seemed unaware of the incident. Upon learning that his employer had been murdered, he appeared visibly shocked. When the police told him about the 2 phrases written in the basement, he was in disbelief and insisted that he had no idea what had happened, let alone that he could ever harm his employer. He asserted that the police must have arrested the wrong person. When asked if Ghislaine might have written the messages, Omar said he couldn't tell because he couldn't read handwriting. As for the 2 phrases, he only recognized the word Omar as it was his name, and it was the only French word he knew how to write. He didn't even know the meaning of the other words. In reality, Omar was not proficient in French. He could only understand simple sentences. His wife was French, but they mostly communicated through gestures in their daily lives. After his arrest, he couldn't communicate normally with the police. They had to temporarily find a Moroccan prisoner who spoke French to help translate, so they could talk with him. The suspect Omar was born in 1962 to a poor family in Morocco. His father had moved to the town of Muguet in France for work to support the family. At 23, Omar also left his homeland for Mugan, where he was finally reunited with the father he had longed to see. He found work at the home of an elderly, kind woman named Pascal. Upon learning of Omar's arrival, she immediately hired him as a gardener, providing him with a generous wage and comfortable accommodations. Omar was grateful to have found stability and worked diligently out of appreciation for her kindness. One day while out and about, Omar happened to meet a French woman. The 2 fell in love at first sight and later married, allowing Omar to remain in France. Pascal extended her blessings to the young couple, even helping them find an apartment and signing an open-ended work contract with Omar, assuring him that he could work for her as long as he wished. Omar was deeply appreciative of this generosity. One day, Guyline visited Pascal's home and happened to see Omar working. Impressed by his skill and work ethic, she obtained Pascal's consent to also hire Omar as her gardener and his wife as a housekeeper. To make their work more convenient, Guyline provided the couple with an apartment located between Pascal's and her own homes, allowing Omar to manage work for both households and enjoy two sources of income. After Omar's first child was born, Pascal helped them rent a larger, more comfortable home in Lucanet. Omar told the police that since he had started working in town, both of his employers had been extremely supportive and he was immensely grateful, feeling he could only repay them by working hard. To Omar, Guyline was like a second mother. She adored his children, and whenever she had free time, she would visit his home to see them, treating them like her own family. Omar firmly stated that he could never and would never harm Guyline, and he added that it had been a long time since he had even gone down to that basement. Although Omar consistently denied committing the crime, the writing at the scene clearly pointed to him as the culprit, and the police remained steadfast in this view. Now they needed to establish a motive and gather further evidence. The police then approached Ms. Pascal to gather more information. She informed them that Omar was a good gardener, dedicated and hardworking. On the day of the incident, June 23rd, Omar had been working at her house all day, and she hadn't noticed any unusual behavior. However, after finishing his work that day, Omar had proactively asked her for 2 days off, explaining that he wanted to attend Eid al-Adha celebrations in Toulon with his family. He mentioned that he had already received permission from Guyline. Hearing this, Ms. Pascal agreed to his leave. Omar left at the end of the workday that evening. The police questioned Omar's wife and father about when they had left town. Omar's wife told the police that she had taken her father-in-law and children to Toulon first, and her husband joined them there on June 24th. She confirmed that he had been with the family the entire time, never going off alone or acting out of character. She described her husband as an honest and hard-working man, with no known enemies, and insisted he would never harm his employer. The police found it highly coincidental that Omar requested time off to go out of town right when the crime occurred. Moreover, when he asked Ms. Pascal for leave, he had mentioned already getting Guyline's permission, which raised suspicions. In theory, Omar had the opportunity to commit the crime. On June 23rd, while working at Ms. Pascal's, he could have secretly gone to Guyline's house to kill her, quickly returned to work, and then left for Toulon on June 24th. This could have been an attempt to create an alibi. The day after Omar's arrest, he attended an initial hearing. He insisted he had no knowledge of what had happened, even declining to seek a lawyer and remaining silent throughout. The next day, he was formally charged by the prosecutor and held in custody. In prison, Omar felt every minute was torturous. He thought he had finally secured a stable job, only to find himself inexplicably entangled in a murder case. He felt exhausted and anxious, missed his family, and wanted desperately to go home. However, whenever he tried to sit down, the guards would take away his chair. This left him feeling distressed, compounded by fear of potential violence, so he did his best to comply. 4 days after the crime, the forensic report revealed that the victim's head injuries resulted from being struck over 5 times with great force. There was a small wound on her neck, not fatal, likely caused by a tool resembling scissors. Her chest and abdomen bore 10 sharp force injuries. All her finger joints were broken, indicating she had fought back with her hands before dying. Additionally, there were scratches and dirt on her arms and legs, suggesting she had been dragged. While there were numerous wounds on her body, none were immediately fatal. Her cause of death was determined to be severe blood loss. The estimated time of death was between 12 p.m. and 1:30 p.m. on June 23rd. DNA tests confirmed that the blood indentures found in the basement belonged to Ghislaine. Due to technological limitations at the time, no other DNA was detected at the scene. Based on the forensic report, the police believed the killer was highly determined to end Ghislaine's life. However, the actions appeared somewhat clumsy, suggesting it may have been the killer's first crime. The perpetrators seemed to harbor a deep hatred toward the victim. Yet, there was a contradiction. Ghislaine had been kind to Omar, and no motive for him to commit the crime could be found. Furthermore, from noon to 1:30 p.m. on June 23rd, Omar was working at his other employer, Ms. Pascal's, leaving him no time to commit the crime. Ms. Pascal also confirmed this. If the real killer wasn't Omar, then why was his name mentioned in the basement? Throughout the basement, only Ghislaine's DNA was found. The only entry point was the locked metal door with a bed blocking it, forming a sealed room. It seemed there was only one possibility, that Ghislaine wrote the killer's name in her final moments. On the other hand, if the writing was done by the killer, it couldn't have been Omar, as he wouldn't incriminate himself. Perhaps the true culprit intended to frame Omar through this message, or it could be that someone else named Omar was involved since the writing didn't include a last name, which might suggest a coincidence. However, this was merely police speculation, with no actual evidence to support it. During the investigation, one officer offered a different perspective. He argued that the writing couldn't have been done by Ghislaine herself, as someone gravely injured and near death, enduring excruciating pain, would hardly be able to write such clear messages. Additionally, one of the lines of text appeared quite neat, a difficult feat for a typical 65-year-old. On closer examination of the writing, they noted grammatical errors. As an educated member of the upper class, Ghislaine was unlikely to make such basic mistakes. However, when the police reviewed some of Ghislaine's personal documents, they found that she often made grammatical errors, especially confusing past and indefinite tenses. It appeared that she had a habit of making such mistakes. Therefore, the possibility that she had written the messages couldn't be ruled out solely based on grammar. A month after the crime, a police handwriting expert compared the letters with Ghislaine's writing in other documents. The results suggested that the 2 lines in the basement were indeed written by Ghislaine. The expert concluded that clear a line had been written while Ghislaine was kneeling, and the fainter line was written while she was lying on the ground. This indicated that by the time she wrote the second line, she had weakened significantly, leaving the message incomplete. Although the handwriting expert believed the messages were Ghislaine's, other experts disagreed. They pointed out that the endings of the letters found at the scene were very short, whereas in Ghislaine's other writings, the letter endings were consistently long, especially certain letters. Based on this, they argued the writing wasn't hers. The issue of handwriting remained contentious, and without a definitive conclusion on whether Ghislaine had written the messages, the investigation hit a dead end. Meanwhile, news of Ghislaine's death spread widely, the media competing to report on the case. Such a strange crime naturally attracted intense public interest, with everyone eager to learn the truth. The pressure on the police to solve the case was mounting. They revisited the scene multiple times in search of clues. With only a single metal door providing access to the basement, it seemed that placing the folding bed, metal pipe, and wooden plank to block the door could only have been done by someone inside the basement. They speculated that Ghislaine might have suffered from some form of illness, and during a moment of instability, she could have acted wildly in the basement. She might then have managed to shut the metal door using the folding bed, metal pipe, and wooden plank to prevent anyone from entering. In a state of mental confusion, she could have written those strange messages. On the day of the crime, Ghislaine had invited friends over for a meal. Given Omar's role as the gardener, he naturally would have known his employer's schedule. Choosing to act at such a time wouldn't have been a smart choice, as it would significantly increase the difficulty of committing the crime. When Ghislaine was found with extensive blood stains on her, if Omar had truly been the culprit, he would likely have had blood on him as well. Yet outside the basement, no blood was found in any other area, nor were there any footprints, not even on the stairs leading to the ground floor. This led to the possibility that Ghislaine herself had staged the entire scene. However, this theory was quickly dismissed by Ghislaine's family and friends. They described her as a cheerful person with a comfortable, untroubled life. She had never sought psychological help, and no psychiatric medications were found in her home. Such behavior seemed impossible. With no new leads, the investigation made no progress, prompting some reporters and private investigators to launch their own inquiries. One reporter, named Levy, pointed out an area in the basement that had been overlooked, the wine cellar. He noted that he had discovered a gap in the police's investigation records, which detailed every room in the basement, but did not describe the structure of the wine cellar. This suggested that the police may not have thoroughly examined that crucial area. Further research by Levy uncovered that in 1989, 2 years before the crime, Ghislaine had hired a contractor to install a ventilation system for the wine cellar. Then, 1 year before the incident, she had 2 windows added to improve airflow in the cellar. Levy also highlighted that the swimming pool's filtration system was located in the basement. Given that Ghislaine had been wearing a bathrobe and slippers, it seemed she had just finished bathing and was likely heading to the basement to turn on the pool's filtration system in preparation for her friends, who might want to swim later. Tragically, she was murdered at that moment. Thus, the entire situation could not have been self-inflicted. The killer, after murdering her, created a sealed room by blocking the door and escaped through a wine cellar window, an oversight that the police had yet to discover. These statements caused a public uproar. Many people felt that what he said made sense and supported his viewpoint. However, others argued that his claims were based on unverified clues. Installing a ventilation system in a basement is quite common, but adding windows seemed unusual. If Levy's reasoning was correct, the prime suspect would still be Omar as Ghislaine's gardener, who was well acquainted with the basement layout. So could the killer be Omar? According to Omar's own account, on the day of the incident, June 23rd, he worked at Ms. Pascal's home in the morning. At noon, he rode his motorcycle from her home to his own residence in Lacanais for lunch. On his way home at 12:05 p.m., he stopped by a bakery in Mugen to buy some bread. At the time, there was only one employee in the bakery. After purchasing the bread, he continued his ride home. Around 12:15 to 12:20 p.m., he arrived at his doorstep and ran into a casino owner with whom he exchanged a few words before parting ways. By 12:40, after finishing lunch, he left home again to return to work at Ms. Pascal's, arriving there around 1:30 p.m. He worked until evening, and then on his way home, stopped at a public phone booth to call his wife, who had gone ahead to Toulon, informing her he would meet them the next day. After the call, he went home to rest. Following Omar's description, the police went to the bakery to verify his claim. The owner checked the work log for June 23rd, and found that there was more than one employee working that afternoon. When questioned, the employees who were present that day all reported not seeing Omar. This raised the possibility that Omar had lied and hadn't visited the bakery that day. Next, the police interviewed the casino owner Omar had mentioned. According to his account, on the afternoon of June 23rd, he had been walking with his wife when he met a friend and invited him to lunch. They then went to a store to buy groceries. Between 12:15 and 12:25 p.m., they finished shopping and went home. The casino owner stated he couldn't recall whether he had encountered Omar, as he usually didn't pay close attention to familiar faces. The police noted that Omar's account didn't mention the casino owner's wife, and the owner himself couldn't remember meeting Omar, suggesting that Omar might have fabricated this part of his story. Upon checking Omar's phone records, police discovered that the call to his wife had been made at 12:51 p.m. on the day of the crime, which didn't align with the timeline he had given. Without a solid alibi for that day, and with sufficient opportunity to commit the crime, Omar remained the prime suspect in the case. Omar argued that he never expected to be accused of murder. Had he known he would be in such a predicament, he would certainly have paid closer attention to every detail of that day. 4 months after the crime, police conducted tests on the clothes and shoes Omar wore on June 23rd, along with a large pair of scissors found at the scene. Results showed that Omar's shoes did not have dust particles from the basement, but traces of plaster and fiberglass were found on his pants. Additionally, animal DNA was detected on the scissors. The police speculated that the worn soles of Omar's shoes had become smooth and therefore didn't retain dust, while the plaster and fiberglass on his pants could have come from the basement where the crime took place. Moreover, the animal DNA on the scissors was broad enough in scope not to rule out the possibility it could be human. However, some experts pointed out that the chemical composition of the plaster and fiberglass didn't match anything in the basement, where no items containing plaster were found and fiberglass could be encountered in other environments. Therefore, these findings alone were insufficient to conclude that Omar had been in the basement. By November 1991, Omar had been in prison for 5 months. He began a hunger strike to protest, demanding his innocence and release, but no one seemed to care. One night, Omar did something shocking. He set his prison blanket on fire. Fortunately, a guard discovered it in time, preventing a larger blaze. After a month without food, Omar had grown very weak. Concerned he might die, the police transferred him to a hospital for treatment and allowed his family to visit. During the visit, Omar broke down in tears, finally releasing his pent-up emotions. With his family's encouragement, he eventually resumed eating. A few days later, Ms. Pascal led a group to meet with the police, including her daughter, son-in-law, and their household maid. They all expressed their belief that Omar was innocent, describing him as a gentle man who wouldn't harm even an ant, let alone kill Ghislaine. They vowed to help him find a lawyer, hoping to clear his name soon. Additionally, Ms. Pascal shared a shocking piece of information with the police. On the night of the incident, she had received an anonymous phone call. The caller, a man with a deep, hoarse voice, said, "Your gardener has caused big trouble." He used his own blood to write that message. Ms. Pascal had initially found the call perplexing, thinking it might be a cruel prank. But after Ghislaine's murder and Omar being identified as the prime suspect, she began to feel that something was off. She now felt certain that the voice on the phone wasn't Omar's. The police were skeptical of Ms. Pascal's story because, in their earlier detailed questioning, she hadn't mentioned the anonymous call. Now 6 months after the crime, she was revealing this crucial detail, casting doubt on its authenticity. Ms. Pascal explained that, at her age, she often forgot things. When the police first questioned her, she had forgotten about the call and only recalled it later. The police conducted surveillance on the phones of Ms. Pascal's and Omar's families, but found nothing unusual. Their conversations mostly revolved around how to help Omar. Although Ms. Pascal's family believed in Omar's innocence, the police did not. They checked his bank records and discovered that over the past 2 years, nearly 80,000 francs, equivalent to about $92,000, had been withdrawn from Omar's account, a substantial sum for that time. As a gardener with a fixed monthly income, where had Omar acquired such a large amount of money? Omar explained that the money wasn't his. It belonged to a friend doing business in France. This friend didn't have a French bank account, so he used Omar's account. Whenever his friend traveled back to Morocco, Omar would help withdraw a portion of the funds. This explanation was confirmed by the friend. The police also learned that Omar frequently requested salary advances from his employers, Ms. Pascal and Ghislaine. At the beginning of the month of the crime, Omar had requested a 1,000 franc advance from Ghislaine. A housemaid working for Ghislaine told the police that a week before the incident, on June 14th, she also saw Omar requesting an advance from Ghislaine. To investigate further, the police spoke with Ms. Pascal. She confirmed that in June, Omar had requested salary advances from her twice, citing rent and money for his mother in Morocco. Ms. Pascal didn't think much of it and agreed, noting that requests for advances were common. As everyone had their financial struggles, the police checked Omar's bank records and found that in June, he hadn't sent any money to his mother or paid rent. In June alone, he had requested 4 advances from his 2 employers. The police presented a theory. Perhaps Omar became resentful if Ghislaine refused his second advance request, which led to the crime. Notably, when Ghislaine was murdered, no cash was found in her handbag. The police questioned Omar about this, but he denied requesting an advance from Ghislaine. However, he admitted to requesting 2 advances from Ms. Pascal in June, explaining that he intended to send money to his mother, but hadn't done so before his arrest. Omar insisted he hadn't taken any money from Ghislaine and would never engage in petty theft. He argued that if he were the culprit, why wouldn't he have taken the jewelry as well? Regarding the missing cash from Ghislaine's handbag, Omar suggested it might have been the housemaid, as he recalled Ghislaine mentioning a maid who frequently took valuable items from the home. The police were skeptical of Omar's statement. During the conversation, Omar inadvertently revealed that he had a gambling habit. The police seized on this point, probing further. Omar admitted he enjoyed gambling, but claimed he only visited the casino a few times a month, playing only games he had previously won, with modest bets. However, the investigation revealed that Omar visited the casino nearly every week, contradicting his account. The police also noted Omar's experience with bar hostesses. A bar owner reported seeing Omar flirt with women in his bar. This painted a different picture of Omar, who appeared less honest than he seemed. Additionally, his previous statements contained inconsistencies that had yet to be cleared up. 6 months after the crime, public interest in the case hadn't waned. Reporters came to the prison to interview Omar. Faced with their questions, he maintained his innocence, accusing investigators of falsely implicating him and deliberately smearing his name. He felt helpless, unsure of how to prove his innocence. Many people, after reading the news, sympathized with Omar, believing in his innocence, and accusing the police of incompetence for detaining an innocent man and pressuring him to confess. 6 months after the crime, in December 1991, Omar applied for bail for the second time, but it was denied, fueling public dissatisfaction. Support for Omar grew louder, with his defense lawyer arguing that the police had wronged him and were obligated to seek justice on his behalf. 2 months later, in February 1992, filed a third bail application. Despite sound arguments from his defense lawyer, the court denied it because, just days before his application, police forensic experts had produced new findings, revealing that dust on Omar's pants matched dust from the basement, indicating he had been there. Omar explained that 2 months before the incident, Ghislaine had bought some flower pots, and not knowing where to store them, she asked him to take them to the basement. The police didn't believe him, as he had previously stated it had been a long time since he'd been in the basement, yet he now claimed to have been there 2 months before the incident, a clear contradiction. In March 1992, a newspaper published an article claiming that, due to his gambling debts, Omar had once stolen a gold necklace from his wife. According to the report, in May 1990, a man named Raydad sold a gold necklace at a jewelry store in France, and this Raydad could have been Omar, whose last name was Raydad. The police questioned Omar about this, but he adamantly denied stealing his wife's necklace, saying it was completely unnecessary. His wife was gentle and respectful toward him, and if he truly needed money, she would have willingly helped him. He insisted it was absurd to think he would steal from her. Most importantly, in May 1990, as the article stated, he wasn't even in France. He was in Morocco, and immigration records could verify this. Therefore, the person who sold the necklace could not have been him. In March 1992, filed a fourth bail application, which was again denied. Before the judge, Omar complained that he wanted to know who had baseless details to the press. He believed that the articles were deliberately trying to smear his reputation, and someone must have leaked these rumors to the reporters. During the subsequent investigation, the police identified several other suspects. These included Omar's own brother, a chef who had a conflict with Ghislaine, a Frenchman, and a man named Gilbert. Initially, the police thought Omar's brother, who resembled him, might have been mistaken for Omar by Ghislaine. However, when they found the brother, they discovered that he didn't resemble Omar at all, had never been to France, and had remained in Morocco the entire time. He was therefore ruled out as a suspect. The chef who had previously clashed with Ghislaine had left his job, and at the time of the incident was working for another employer, with a solid alibi proving he wasn't at the scene, so he was also eliminated as a suspect. The Frenchman had left France for Switzerland 2 days before the crime and didn't return until afterward, with clear travel records confirming this, so he was ruled out as well. The final suspect, Gilbert, lived in a trailer not far from Ghislaine's home and had a poor reputation, with neighbors accusing him of petty theft. However, on the day of the crime, he wasn't in France but was visiting relatives in Morocco, verified by his plane ticket and passport. With this, all individual suspicions were cleared. In April 1992, filed a fifth bail application, but was once again denied. Frustrated, he began a hunger strike on April 16th to protest, and a few days later, he even refused water. He was quickly hospitalized after passing out. Despite his extreme protest, he received no encouraging news. 2 months later, a judge visited him in the hospital to inform him that his sentence would be extended by another year. This devastated Omar, worsening his mental and physical health. His defense lawyer questioned whether this suffering was the result of imprisoning an innocent man, arguing that no clear evidence identified Omar as the culprit and that he shouldn't endure such treatment. After nearly a month of hunger striking, Omar realized it wasn't working and gave up. In March 1993, he was transferred to a prison in Nice, confined to a solitary cell for special prisoners, where the toilet was clogged, the walls were filthy, and the conditions were revolting. He became desperate and angry, losing all hope in life. At one point, he hid a razor blade in a piece of bread and swallowed it. He alerted the guards afterward, but initially, they ignored him until he collapsed in pain. Eventually, he was taken to the hospital and survived. After his recovery, he resumed his extreme protests. Upon release from the hospital, he was transferred to a standard cell with better conditions. Omar spent 10 months in the Nice prison. During this time, the police officially announced the conclusion of their investigation into Ghislaine's case. 3 years after the crime, in January 1994, the trial began at the Nice local court. Defendant Omar Raydad was charged with murder. On the day of the trial, the courtroom was packed, with some supporters believing in Omar's innocence. After 9 intense days of arguments between both sides, the verdict was announced. Omar Raydad was found guilty of murder and sentenced to 18 years in prison. Many around the world were disheartened by this outcome, feeling that Omar had not received a fair trial. The news sparked a wave of public outcry in France, and even caused a stir in the Moroccan community. Many believed the case lacked sufficient evidence, and that Omar was an innocent victim, leading to widespread support and demands for a retrial. Omar's defense lawyer hired a private investigator to seek evidence in his favor and encouraged him not to lose hope. 2 weeks after the verdict, in February 1994, a group of 18 lawyers issued a joint statement condemning the court for convicting Omar with insufficient evidence. Together, they demanded a retrial. Following this statement, the Labor Union Federation promptly released an article criticizing the group of lawyers, claiming that a few politically motivated attorneys, eager for fame, were publicly defaming the judicial system. A month later, a writer named Lore published a book on the case titled Omar, The Making of a Criminal. He stated that he wrote the book in 3 weeks, driven by anger. Lore believed that Omar was also a victim in Ghislaine's case, caught in an elaborate setup, and hinted that there might be hidden political dealings behind the case. He also pointed out that Ghislaine's brother-in-law was a prominent figure in the marble industry, who may have influenced Ghislaine's trial, using power and connections to tilt the scales of justice, resulting in an unfair trial for Omar. Following these statements, Ghislaine's family promptly filed a defamation lawsuit against the author. In court, the judge ruled that Lore's claims lacked evidence and had caused emotional distress to Ghislaine's family. Lore was found guilty of defamation, ordered to apologize to the family, and required to pay damages. That same year, another author named Verges also published a book on the case, titled Omar Matou, Histoire d'un crime. In it, the author sharply criticized judicial injustice, and suggested that racial discrimination was involved. In 1994, a woman living in the town of Muros happened to read this book. She voluntarily reached out to the author, claiming that on the day of the crime, she saw a truck left near Ghislaine's home, with some wooden boards in the back, which appeared to have blood stains on them. She suspected that the owner of this truck could be the real killer of Ghislaine. The author Verges, along with the woman, held a press conference to publicly reveal this crucial clue. The police were compelled to investigate, and discovered that the truck the woman saw belonged to a neighbor who was a painter and regularly used the truck to transport wood and red paint. At the time of the crime, the painter had a solid alibi, so he was ruled out as a suspect. In May of that same year, an article titled The Second Omar appeared in the press. The article claimed that G.I.'s Lane knew another man named Omar, and the two had met at a casino before the crime occurred. Following this lead, the police did indeed locate another man named Omar, who lived about 10 miles from Moreau. However, verification showed that this man had no connection to Ghislaine. The article was merely a ploy to attract media attention. Meanwhile, Omar, who was incarcerated, had repeatedly appealed to the Supreme Court. A year later, the French Supreme Court declared that there had been no procedural errors during Ghislaine's trial, and asserted that Omar's trial had been fair. In September of that year, a man released from Clairvaux prison revealed to a Moroccan newspaper that during his time in prison, a fellow inmate named Alain had confessed to him, claiming that he was the one who killed Ghislaine. Alain allegedly had a girlfriend who worked as a maid at Ghislaine's home, but had been fired for poor performance. The maid, angry about her dismissal, reportedly asked Alain to take revenge on Ghislaine. The two allegedly broke into Ghislaine's villa intending to steal, but when they were caught, they panicked and killed her. Alain supposedly wrote Omar Matou to shift suspicion onto Omar and mislead the police. Upon receiving this statement, the police immediately questioned Alain. The results showed that on the day of the crime, Alain was in the hospital due to a motorcycle accident, and his girlfriend was also at the hospital taking care of him. Alain admitted that what he said in prison was fabricated. The police checked hospital records confirming his alibi, and the lead once again came to a dead end. In May 1996, at the request of Morocco's King Hassan II, French President Jacques Chirac reduced Omar's sentence from 18 years to 4 years and 8 months. Additionally, a secret agreement was reached that Morocco would release a French prisoner. 7 years after the case, another article about Ghislaine's murder suggested that Ghislaine had previously had financial disputes with 3 Italian men who later fled to Italy. However, as this news emerged, all attention shifted to Omar's impending release the following day. People were curious to see how the wrongly accused gardener would live after gaining his freedom. That day, crowds gathered outside the prison. As Omar walked out, cheers erupted. In an interview with reporters, Omar said he would not give up on seeking the truth and was determined to find the real killer to clear his name. After the interview, he got into a car and left, looking well, and even flashing a victory sign at the cameras before departing. In February 2000, on the 6th anniversary of Omar's conviction, the Court of Appeals, at the request of the Investigation and Review Committees, ordered a reopening of the investigation into Ghislaine's case, specifically re-examining the handwriting found at the scene. The task was given to two handwriting experts. Their findings showed that the two messages found in the basement were not written by the victim, Ghislaine. In January 2001, the Court of Appeals further ordered DNA testing on items found at the scene, such as the metal pipe, wooden plank, and paper bags. A month later, results revealed the DNA of two men, though their identities could not be determined. This new evidence was not substantial enough to affect Omar's conviction. 11 years after the incident, writer-lawyer received a mysterious call from a man claiming to be named Guy. The caller said he had once been a driver for the leader of the Solar Temple cult, of which Ghislaine was allegedly a member. Guy stated that at 11:45 a.m. on June 23, 1991, he had driven three other cult members to Ghislaine's house. The three individuals exited the car while he drove away, returning at 2:15 p.m. to pick them up. Speculated that Ghislaine might have been killed by the cult due to financial disputes. Lore passed this information to the police, but upon investigation, they found that Guy was a con artist with no evidence to back his story. He had a criminal history with multiple convictions for blackmail and fraud. Guy's account was deemed unreliable, and likely an attempt to seek attention. After his release, Omar wrote a book about his experiences titled Pourquoi Moi, translated to English as Why Me? In the book, he details his wrongful conviction and the suffering he endured. The book quickly became a phenomenon, selling very well, and even being adapted into a film. Notably in the book, Omar mentions a bakery and explains that when questioned by police, he mistakenly gave the wrong bakery's name. In reality, he frequented a different bakery, but hadn't realized his mistake at the time. Many readers visited this bakery, and the staff confirmed that Omar indeed often came by around noon to buy bread. To this day, Omar continues his search for the truth. Although he received a partial pardon and now lives freely, he still cannot find peace and constantly strives to prove his innocence, tirelessly seeking ways to appeal. However, some still believe the case is not as complex as it seems, and that Omar is the one who killed Ghislaine. Perhaps only he truly knows the real truth of this case. Story 4. On June 9, 2008 in Anyang, a city in South Korea's Gyeonggi province, a karaoke hostess named Ms. Kim was growing increasingly worried. She hadn't heard from her close friend and colleague Kong for 2 days, completely out of character for someone who worked diligently to make ends meet. Despite repeatedly calling and texting, there was no response. Concerned for her friend's safety, Ms. Kim took a taxi to Kang's second-floor apartment around midnight after her shift ended. Upon arriving, she noticed dim light filtering through the curtains. Knowing her friend never slept with lights on, Ms. Kim suspected Kong might still be awake. After ringing the doorbell and calling out several times without response, she tried the door and was surprised to find it unlocked. What awaited inside was horrifying. Kang's body lay face down in a pool of blood in the living room, her skin already turning purple. The crime scene was brutal, with fatal wounds scattered across the victim's body. 2 stab wounds to the face, 2 to the neck, and a particularly savage 28 wounds to the chest and abdomen. Another 39 wounds were found on her thighs and calves. The attack was so violent that 1 stab to the left side of her face had enough force to break off her lower 4th tooth. Given the brutality of the crime and the strength evident in the wounds, investigators initially suspected the perpetrator was likely a physically strong male. At the crime scene, investigators discovered an open bedroom window. On the floor next to the bed, a series of size 8 US bloody shoe prints were clearly visible, even marking the mattress. Testing confirmed this was the victim's blood. These bloody footprints created a winding path through the bedroom, before forming a straight line leading to the front door. The apartment layout was clear from the crime scene diagram. The front door opened into the living room, while the bedroom where the initial attack occurred was in the upper left corner. Based on the open window and blood patterns on the bed, police reconstructed the sequence. The killer had entered through the window and surprised the victim while she was resting. In panic, Kong tried to escape, opening the bedroom door and running to the living room, where she was ultimately killed. The perpetrator then fled through the front door. Initially, police noticed signs of what appeared to be a typical robbery. Drawers and closets in the bedroom were disturbed, and cash was missing from the victim's wallet. However, upon closer inspection, they found several inconsistencies in the ransacking. While drawers were pulled out and contents disturbed, it seemed the perpetrator had only made a cursory attempt. Most clothes remained neatly folded in the closet, with just a few items carelessly thrown on the floor. More suspiciously, while cash was taken from the wallet, valuable items like savings books, the wallet itself, and additional cash in a drawer remained untouched. The victim's jewelry was still on her body. These contradictions at the crime scene convinced investigators this was likely a poorly staged robbery. The killer had taken only a small amount of money to mislead the investigation. Notably, the killer's straight path when leaving the scene and complete disregard for living room cabinets painted a clear picture. The perpetrator had deliberately climbed through the bedroom window, went straight for the victim, then only superficially searched before escaping. From these details, police theorized this was a murder disguised as a robbery. The shocking number of stab wounds, 39 in total, suggested the killer had acted in extreme rage or emotional agitation. This indicated the perpetrator likely knew the victim and possibly had deep-seated conflicts with her. However, the investigation was hampered by the absence of fingerprints or DNA evidence like hair or blood from the killer at the scene. Additionally, in 2008, there were no security cameras in the area around the apartment, making the search for the perpetrator even more challenging. Through interviews with those close to the victim, investigators pieced together a picture of Kang's life. She was a divorced woman who had been living in the apartment for several years. Her son, Kim Jong-jae, aged 20, was a college student who had previously lived with her before moving to a new place closer to his university and part-time job. Of particular interest was Kang's relationship with her 45-year-old boyfriend. Mr. Wally frequently stayed overnight at the apartment. Neighbors reported their relationship was far from peaceful. Intense arguments were common, primarily stemming from Lee's excessive jealousy. A crucial detail emerged when neighbors recalled hearing screams from Kang's apartment around 5 a.m. on June 7th. However, being so accustomed to the couple's arguments, they had drowsily ignored it. When cross-referenced with the forensic results, police confirmed this was the time of death, approximately 2.5 days before the body was discovered. These clues quickly made Lee the primary suspect. Police met with Kang's son Kim, who was living in a rented room about 2 miles away. Upon learning of his mother's murder, Kim was devastated. She was his only remaining family member, as his parents had divorced 7 years earlier, and his father had died in a traffic accident. When asked about Lee, Kim confirmed his mother's romantic relationship and revealed the frequent conflicts caused by Lee's unfounded jealousy. During the investigation into Kang's relationships, acquaintances consistently reported Lee's controlling behavior, such as monitoring her work hours, checking her phone, and blocking numbers of people he suspected. Phone records showed Lee frequently called Kang, but abruptly stopped contact a few days before the murder. These clues made Lee increasingly suspicious in the investigators' eyes. However, during the investigation, a new detail emerged that complicated the case. About a year before her death, Kang had purchased a total of 13 life insurance policies with monthly premiums totaling approximately $1,500, a significant sum given her financial situation, forcing her to work multiple jobs to cover the payments. The policies would pay out about $250,000 upon her death, with her only son Kim as the sole beneficiary. While it's common for children to be beneficiaries of their parents' life insurance, the unusual number of policies and the substantial payout made investigators consider the possibility that Kim might be involved in his mother's death. Therefore, the primary focus became verifying both Kim's and Lee's whereabouts at the time of the murder. During questioning, Kim stated that from the evening of June 6th until the following afternoon, he had been in his rented apartment hosting a drinking party with 3 friends. All 3 friends confirmed this alibi, and despite repeated questioning, their statements remained perfectly consistent. When asked about his mother's insurance policies, appeared completely surprised and insisted he knew nothing about them. As investigators delved deeper into the mother and son's past, they uncovered a tragic story. Kang had given birth to Kim when she was 22, then had to raise him alone while her husband worked away and rarely sent money home. Although Kang tried every possible job to provide for her son, fate wasn't kind to them. When Kim was 8, a series of misfortunes struck. Economic hardship and Kang's serious illness that required frequent treatment prevented her from working. Finally, with only social welfare to rely on, she made the heartbreaking decision to place her son in an orphanage, only able to visit occasionally. It wasn't until 15 years later, when her health improved and she found stable employment, that Kong was finally able to bring her son home. The mother and son lived together for 2 years before Kim moved out after finding a job. Investigators believe that those 15 years of separation had left Kong with deep guilt and a desire to compensate her son. The multiple life insurance policies with Kim as beneficiary might have been her way of ensuring her son's future in case anything happened to her. Kang's friends reported that she often expressed regret about her son, particularly about the material and emotional hardships he endured during childhood. She constantly felt guilty about not being able to provide adequately for Kim, and often confided in friends about her fear of not being able to care for him. If something happened to her, she viewed the insurance policies as a way to secure Kim's future. To afford the substantial insurance premiums, worked tirelessly. During the day, she sold cross-stitch embroidery at a craft store, then worked nights as a karaoke hostess. Despite this grueling schedule, she never forgot her responsibilities to her son. Even though Kim had income from his part-time job, Kong insisted on supporting him fully, covering his college tuition and most of his monthly living expenses. Given the substantial insurance payout potential, police couldn't ignore Kim as a suspect despite how unlikely it seemed given the mother-son relationship. The investigation focused on 2 main suspects, Lee, the jealous boyfriend, and Kim, the only son and beneficiary of the insurance policies. However, Lee was quickly eliminated as a suspect when security cameras clearly showed him returning home on the evening of June 6th and not leaving until the next morning. Additionally, an important detail from the crime scene further cleared both suspects. The bloody footprints were size 8 US, while both Lee and Kim wore size 9.5. The investigation had reached a dead end until a new clue emerged, a small blood stain found near the front door handle. Significantly, this blood wasn't the victim's and appeared fresh, suggesting the killer had been injured during the attack. Testing revealed it was typo blood, which didn't match either Lee's or Kim's blood type. This discovery once again confirmed that neither primary suspect was the killer. At this point, with Lee's alibi solidly confirmed by security footage, only Kim's alibi, supported by 3 friends, could potentially have discrepancies due to human factors. Police therefore scrutinized the testimonies of the 3 friends, who were allegedly with Kim on the night of the murder, more closely. Upon further investigation, police discovered all 3 had grown up together in the same orphanage and were very close. Suspecting possible collusion between close friends, police changed their interrogation strategy. They separated each person and asked more detailed, probing questions. This tactic proved effective when one of them began to waver. He admitted to arriving late due to work commitments, and when pressed further, he became evasive and reluctant to continue the interrogation. This unusual reaction only heightened police suspicions about the truthfulness of their initial statements. Under intense questioning, this friend finally revealed a crucial detail. That night, there weren't just 4 of them at Kim's apartment. There was a 5th person named Cho Kyung-hwan. Kim had instructed his friends to maintain their story if questioned by police, but absolutely not to mention Cho. This was clearly suspicious. Why would all 5 people spend the evening together, but deliberately exclude Cho from their statements? Further investigation revealed that Cho was quite close to Kim, and for a time when Kim still lived with his mother, Cho had stayed at Kang's home when he had nowhere else to go. Suspiciously, immediately after the murder, Cho had turned off his phone and disappeared. Through security camera footage, they discovered he had taken a bus to Gunsan in North Jeolla province the day after the murder. Since Cho also knew Kim from the orphanage, police investigated there and discovered a crucial detail. Cho's blood type was O, matching the unknown blood found at the crime scene. Additionally, during questioning, one friend revealed that when using the bathroom at Kim's house the day after the murder, he had discovered a bloody bandage in the corner. This evidence supported the theory that Cho was injured during the murder and had used the bandage to treat his wound. With these clues, police launched a manhunt for Cho, who had vanished from his residence and was now the prime suspect. Understanding that those who grew up in orphanages often maintained special bonds with each other, investigators contacted all of Cho's old friends from the orphanage. This logic was based on a simple fact: without parents or relatives, would likely turn to his closest friends for help. This strategy quickly paid off when one of Cho's friends informed police of his whereabouts. The manhunt ended on June 26, 2008, when police arrested Cho at a public phone booth several miles from downtown Gunsan. Surprisingly, when cornered, the 19-year-old made no attempt to resist. Instead, he immediately confessed to killing Kong, the mother of Kim, whom he considered his closest friend. However, the most shocking revelation came during subsequent interrogations, provided testimony that completely reversed the course of the investigation. Kim, the son who appeared devastated by his mother's death, was actually the mastermind behind the murder. Furthermore, Cho revealed that Kim knew very well about the life insurance policies his mother had purchased. This testimony proved Kim had lied, because how could an outsider like Cho know about Kang's insurance policies while Kim, her own son, claimed ignorance? Kim must have told Cho, contradicting his earlier statement to police that he knew nothing about the insurance policies. During interrogation, Cho revealed a cruel plan born from Kim's greed. Tired of their modest life, Kim proposed a horrific solution to Cho. "How long must we live in poverty like this? If we just kill my mother, the insurance money will be enough for us to live comfortably. I'll share a portion of the money with you if you help me." Blinded by the enormous insurance payout of $250,000, Kim repeatedly discussed this plan with Cho, painting pictures of the luxurious life that awaited them. Eventually, Cho agreed to participate in this horrific conspiracy. On the night of June 6th, after letting their 3 friends fall into a drunken sleep, Kim and Cho quietly left the rental apartment and went to Ms. Kang's home. Kim had prepared a small folding ladder to break in through the second-floor side window. Knowing that the sliding door had no latch, no bars, and could never be properly locked. After Kim climbed into the house, he opened the door from inside to let Cho in, then climbed back down to wait in the car. Around 5 a.m., when Kong was returning home from work, Kim sat in the car watching his mother walking across the front yard toward the building. He immediately called Cho to signal that his mother was about to enter, instructing him to hide carefully in the bedroom, wait for Kong to enter, then strike, ensuring she couldn't escape, and call for help. Emphasized that Cho must complete the plan at all costs. While Cho was killing Ms. Kong inside, Kim hurriedly left the car and stood guard at the apartment's main entrance, intending to prevent his mother from escaping and ready to assist Cho if needed to ensure his mother's death. After the murder, Cho and Kim staged the scene to look like a robbery, taking money from Kang's wallet. During the struggle, Cho's hand was injured and cut. After the murder, he tried to erase all traces, wiping clean fingerprints and blood at the scene. Before dawn, they drove to a nearby mountain to dispose of the murder weapons, including the knife, gloves, and clothes, then returned to Kim's apartment and went to bed as if they had been there all night. The 3 friends unknowingly became alibis for Kim. Cho's revelations completely reversed the case. Kim was no longer just an accomplice, but emerged as the mastermind who planned his own mother's murder. In subsequent interrogations, revealed a notable backstory. When he turned 18 and left the orphanage, Kim had suggested to his mother that Cho live with their family. This proposal stemmed from their special bond formed during their childhood at the orphanage. Initially, Ms. Kong agreed to her son's wish, partly wanting to compensate for her son's past, and partly wanting to help a young man from the orphanage who had experienced trauma. However, Cho was already 18 to 19 years old, but unemployed, which created significant financial pressure on Ms. Kong, who was supporting her son through college. After a few months, she found Cho a job at a nearby restaurant that included room and board to reduce her living expenses. In his distorted mind, Cho interpreted this as Ms. Kang's subtle way of pushing him out of the house. This resentment simmered within Cho, and when Kim proposed the plan to kill his mother for insurance money, he quickly agreed to help, driven both by greed and revenge. Based on Cho's confession, police immediately arrested Kim at his rental apartment in Anyang. However, even faced with solid evidence and his accomplice's detailed testimony, Kim stubbornly denied all accusations. Furthermore, he cleverly exploited his circumstances to gain sympathy from the online community. Kim crafted an image of himself as a sympathetic figure, someone who had overcome adversity from the orphanage, studied diligently, and was now being falsely accused of the horrific crime of killing his own mother. Despite Kim's attempts to deny his guilt, the evidence against him became increasingly compelling. Investigators found Kim's car rental records from a self-drive rental shop, along with a gas station transaction made at 1:20 a.m. on June 7th, precisely when Kim claimed he was sleeping at home. These transactions were undeniable, as they were clearly recorded on his credit card statements. Another crucial piece of evidence was Kim's fingerprints found on the second-floor window, perfectly matching Cho's testimony about how Kim had climbed through the window to let Cho in. While finding Kim's fingerprints in his mother's house would normally be unremarkable, the critical detail was the direction of the prints. If someone had placed their hand on the windowsill from inside the house, the fingerprints would point outward, but these prints pointed inward from the outside. This detail confirmed Cho's testimony about Kim climbing through the window. Police theorized that Kim had removed his gloves to better grip the stiff sliding door, which had become difficult to open over time. While cleaning up afterward, he had only wiped the glass portion of the window, forgetting about the prints on the windowsill. With an array of irrefutable evidence, from credit card transactions for car rental and gas, fingerprints on the windowsill indicating entry from outside, to Cho's detailed testimony, Kim had to face trial despite his persistent denials. During the trial, testimony from one of Ms. Kang's close friends moved the entire courtroom to tears. I find it both unbelievable and heartbreaking. His mother always reassured him not to worry about anything, saying she had prepared everything so he could live well, even if she wasn't around. The witness described a devoted mother who worked tirelessly day and night to support her son's college education. Even after Kim moved out, Ms. Kang continued to provide his rent money, doing everything possible to make up for his deprived past. It was tragic that such sacrifices were repaid with such a horrific end. The contrasting attitudes of the two killers during the trial highlighted the heinous nature of the crime. When recounting his cruel acts, trembled and broke down in tears, showing remorse. In stark contrast, Kim, the mastermind and the victim's son, reacted with chilling indifference. He even tried to justify his actions with the cold statement, "I didn't tell Cho to stab her that many times." Kim's callousness became even more apparent when asked about his feelings upon seeing his mother's body near the bedroom door. While staging the crime scene, without any hint of remorse or regret, he coldly replied that he wasn't thinking about anything at the time, just wanting to quickly complete the task and leave. In this unfilial son's mind, the image of his dead mother seemed meaningless, replaced only by calculations about the luxurious life he would have from the insurance money. During the investigation, police discovered another incident that Cho and Kim had committed on April 25, 2008, about a month and a half before Ms. Kang's murder. The pair had attacked a cafe owner in Anyang, stealing her credit card and around $75 in cash. They later admitted this was a practice run for the subsequent murder, indicating they had been planning the crime for several months before killing Ms. Kang. Throughout the interrogation and trial process, Cho showed remorse and fully cooperated, confessing to everything. In contrast, Kim, the victim's son, remained cold and emotionless, even saying his mother deserved it for abandoning him at the orphanage. On November 12, 2008, faced with overwhelming evidence, both Cho Kyung-hwan and Kim Jong-jun were sentenced to life imprisonment. They appealed, but the appellate court not only upheld, but increased their sentences to death. This verdict was confirmed by the Supreme Court on June 23, 2009. Even in his final trial, Kim Jong-jun showed no remorse, defiantly asking the court, "What has my mother ever done for me?" This ungrateful and cruel question caused an uproar in the courtroom and sparked public outrage. Although the death penalty was imposed, justice was ultimately served in a different way. Kim Jong-jae ended it all himself in 2011. 1 year later, in 2012, Cho Kyung-hwan also chose a similar way. Perhaps it was the guilt over their horrific crime, or the inability to live with the weight of killing such a devoted mother, that made both men unable to bear the consequences of their actions. Their deaths in prison brought this heartbreaking case to a close. It is painfully ironic that a mother's loving intention to provide for her child inadvertently became the tool for her ungrateful son's crime. This case isn't just a story about a horrific crime, but also a warning about how greed can corrupt human nature, causing people to lose their humanity and most basic moral values. Story 5. Glory Chow Wing-ki and Munchu Yudi, an elderly couple with 2 sons, the eldest Chow Hoying and the younger, Henry Chow Hoylong. They were a well-off family. Both parents were retired and owned multiple properties. In addition to the passive income they received from rental properties, the couple enjoyed social gatherings, tea outings, and traveling. They were in their 60s. While they were enjoying a comfortable retirement and their final years of fulfillment, a tragic event struck them. Let's go back to March 7, 2013, to understand what happened. On that Thursday, two brothers went to the Western District Police Station to report an incident. The report was filed by Hoi Ying and Henry Chow, who told the police our parents, 65-year-old Glory Chow and 62-year-old Munshu, went missing after leaving home 5 days ago. We've tried everything, but haven't been able to contact them. We hope the police can help find them soon. The police learned from Henry Chow that on March 2nd, 5 days earlier, he had gone to Langham Place Mall in Mong Kok with his parents for tea. During that time, his parents told him they were planning to visit mainland China for 2 days, but they didn't mention a specific location. After that, the two left. Days passed, and the date his parents were supposed to return came, but Henry Chow hadn't seen them come home. His parents' cell phones were turned off, and despite all his efforts, he couldn't reach them. When Chow Hoying returned from work, he also mentioned that he couldn't get in touch with their parents and had left work early to come home and check. Henry Chow told his older brother that their parents had gone to mainland China and hadn't returned. After learning this, Hoying quickly advised his brother to call close friends and family to see if anyone knew where their parents were. However, after asking around, no one knew their whereabouts. The brothers grew puzzled. They began checking their parents and discovered that their passports and return permits were still at home, so they hadn't left Hong Kong. The two suspected their parents might have encountered some financial troubles, but according to their parents' bank records, their savings had not been touched during this time. The two brothers then decided to go to mainland China to look for their parents. For Hong Kong residents to enter mainland China, they need a mainland travel permit for Hong Kong and Macau residents, also known as a return permit. Although their parents' permits were found at home, the brothers thought they might have reapplied for them. Not knowing exactly where their parents went, they decided to go to Shenzhen, as their parents owned property there. After the two brothers arrived in Shenzhen, they discovered that their parents had not been there recently. They returned to Hong Kong disappointed, realizing that their parents had been missing for several days, which left them feeling extremely anxious. On March 7th, they both went to the police station to ask for help. Upon receiving the report, the police immediately began their investigation. Based on information provided by the two sons, the missing father, Glory Chow, 65, was last seen wearing a dark blue blazer, a long-sleeved shirt, jeans, and rimless glasses. The missing mother, Moon Shu, 62, was last seen wearing a light gray shirt and jeans. Both were carrying a crossbody bag. According to Henry Chow, his parents planned to travel to mainland China. Therefore, the police launched an investigation at the train station, ferry terminals, and airport. Additionally, they focused on the route from their home to Langham Place Mall, questioning nearby shops, residents, and passers-by along the way. The Chow brothers also searched nearby streets, hoping to find clues. They even printed flyers with photos of their parents and relevant details, distributing them in areas their parents might have visited, hoping to find witnesses. 2 days later, on March 9th, 2013, Hoying continued the search through social media. He created a Facebook page called Missing Parents. On this page, Hoying described his parents' characteristics and details since March 2nd, 2013, when they said they would travel to mainland China. He also provided and updated related information on the page. Younger brother Henry Chow also spoke to the media, hoping to find his parents through this channel. He shared their family situation and ruled out the possibility of kidnapping. Henry described his parents' appearance and clothing before they disappeared. Despite their best efforts, the brothers received no updates from their parents, which they found very strange. Their parents were known to own numerous properties and enjoyed a prosperous retirement. They loved hiking and traveling. Police investigated the couple's travel records and found they hadn't left the country recently. Initially, the police suspected it might be a case of kidnapping for ransom. However, after waiting, neither the sons nor other family members or friends received any ransom calls from potential kidnappers, so this theory was ruled out. If their parents hadn't left the country, then based on their usual travel habits, they might have gone hiking somewhere in Hong Kong. There was the unfortunate possibility that they could have had an accident on the mountain, or they might have been robbed and killed. However, the clothing they were wearing when they disappeared, casual jeans and simple bags, didn't look like hiking or travel attire at all. According to Henry Chow, his mother Moon Sue was always very meticulous. If she planned to travel, she would usually inform her children in advance. For instance, she would make sure to tell them whether or not she had bought insurance and where to keep the policy. She would always let them know how many days she'd be away and when she'd be back, even calling them to confirm her return time. Henry Chow believed, if my parents weren't out hiking, they might have gone to the Guangdong opera class to meet friends and sing opera, or perhaps they went out for tea with old colleagues. But when my brother Ho Ying and I checked our parents' bank account, we didn't find any recent transaction history. The cash at home hadn't been touched either. Additionally, none of the people who recently interacted with my parents had seen them. News of Henry Chow's parents quickly gained public attention. After the media coverage, some observant internet users noticed odd expressions on Henry Chow's face. His eyes seemed to avoid direct contact at times, as if he was hesitant to look straight. He even smiled during the interview, giving the impression that he wasn't genuinely worried about his disappearance. Consequently, some netizens boldly speculated that the elderly couple hadn't vanished, but may have been murdered by their son, Henry Chow. In fact, Hong Kong police had long suspected Henry Chow. According to his statement, his parents went missing after having tea with him on March 2nd. However, when police reviewed all the surveillance footage from Langham Place Mall, neither Henry Chow nor his parents appeared there on that day. The family lived in a residential area in Saiwan. A neighbor mentioned seeing the parents leave home on March 1st, but they hadn't returned since. This matched the account from the older brother, Ho Ying. On the morning of March 1st, Ho Ying had left for work early and said goodbye to his parents before leaving. However, when he returned home that evening, they were nowhere to be found. At the time, Chow Ho Ying asked his younger brother, Henry Chow, where their parents had gone. Henry explained that their parents went out that afternoon for tea with friends to reminisce. Ho Ying thought that since his parents were now enjoying their retirement years and financially independent, they could freely travel or meet with friends, so he didn't think much of it and calmly waited for them to return. On March 2nd, 2013, Ho Ying still hadn't seen his parents after returning from work. This made him wonder if something had happened to them. He decided to call the police for assistance, but was stopped by his younger brother, Henry Chow, who had just returned home. Henry told him that their parents said they were going to mainland China for 2 days and were in a hurry, so they asked him to inform Ho Ying later. Ho Ying felt that his brother's explanation didn't make sense. Although their parents loved to travel, they always made arrangements in advance, especially notifying both sons of their plans. This situation had never happened before. While Ho Ying still had his doubts, his brother had tried to reassure him about their parents' well-being, so he didn't press further and decided to wait patiently for their return. 5 days later, on March 7, 2013, with no sign of their parents' return and unable to reach them by phone, Ho Ying and his brother's search efforts had been fruitless. Finally, he decided to go to the police station with his brother, report their disappearance. From the information in the report, there were numerous suspicious signs suggesting that if Glory Chow and Moon Seo hadn't encountered trouble outside, it was highly likely that the youngest son, Henry Chow, had been lying all along. Subsequently, the police added Henry Chow to their list of suspects for a more detailed investigation. 1 week after receiving the report, on March 14, 2013, members of the crime unit began following leads to investigate Henry Chow. During questioning, Henry continued to insist that his parents had gone to mainland China. However, the police quickly noticed something was off. While recounting the events, Henry Chow appeared visibly uneasy, his gaze shifting around, and he frequently drank water to relieve tension. At that point, the police knew Henry Chow was lying about his parents' whereabouts. He was now their prime suspect, but they still needed additional evidence to prove his involvement in his parents that night. The police received a phone call that would mark a major turning point in the investigation. The caller, claiming to know Henry Chow through an online game, informed the police that around 7 p.m., Henry had shared with the group, "My parents aren't missing, I killed them." Henry reportedly confessed, saying, "I am a psychopath. Since childhood, I've had emotions that ordinary people don't experience. I lack empathy and cannot feel others' pain. I resent my parents deeply and no longer wanted them to live in this world." In addition to this lead, the police received several similar reports. One of Henry Chow's real-life friends told the police that, on the afternoon his parents disappeared, Henry confessed to him about killing his parents. The friend then asked, "Does your brother Ho Ying know about this?" Henry replied, "I don't want to scare others, and my brother might end up losing 3 family members at once, our parents and his brother." Henry Chow's cousin, Seo Kun, also reported to the police that Henry had told her about killing his parents. He even mentioned that he intended to get rid of his brother Ho Ying as well. On March 7th, Seo In-kun received a call from Hoi Ying and learned about the disappearance of her uncle and aunt. On March 11th, Seo In-kun and her parents went to visit the Chow brothers to discuss ways to search for their missing parents. At that time, Henry Chow showed no unusual behavior and didn't seem worried about his parents. They split into groups to search for the missing parents. Henry Chow even asked his cousin, Seo In-kun, to check the recent activity on his parents' credit cards. On March 14th, Henry unexpectedly sent a message to Seo In-kun, saying, "I have something personal to tell you, and I want to meet you. If I don't meet with you, I fear I'll never have the chance to share the truth." In the message, he also mentioned, "You make me feel connected to the world, and don't make me hate it." After reading her cousin's message, Seo In-kun thought something might have happened to him, so she immediately agreed to meet. Because Henry Chow had to respond to police questioning about his parents that afternoon, he postponed their meeting with his cousin until midnight at Tai Kok Sway. That night, Seo In-kun arrived at meeting place early, but Henry was late. As soon as he sat down, he asked Seo In-kun, who worked at a church, "Does Christ forgive?" During the conversation, Henry Chow revealed, "Since childhood, I never liked my parents. I felt they placed too many expectations on me, which put immense pressure on me because I couldn't meet those expectations. That's why I planned to disappear from this world before turning 30. But I changed my mind after meeting my soulmate, Ake." While confiding in Seo In-kun, Henry emphasized, "I am a psychopath and can't feel others' pain. My parents often beat and scolded me, and my brother sometimes bullied me too. So I planned to kill my parents first, then my brother. However, after my parents disappeared, I felt the affection my brother had for me. So I changed my mind and decided not to harm him." Henry also disclosed to Seo In-kun, "Ake and I share similar experiences, the same thoughts, and we both understand each other's emotions." The murder plan had been prepared months in advance. He then recounted in detail to Seo In-kun the time and place where he killed his parents, as well as where he disposed of their body parts. He initially wrapped the body parts in garbage bags and threw them into the sea. However, realizing that the bags would float, he decided to cook the parts into barbecued pork rice dishes and discard them as food waste. Henry Chow also told Seo In-kun that after committing the crime, he had to go to the hospital for treatment due to an injury. He had to get 7 stitches in his left leg, which delayed his plan to dispose of his parents. At the end of their conversation, Henry Chow told her, "I really can't bring myself to tell my brother the full truth, so if you ever have the chance, please tell him for me." Seo In-kun was shocked by what Henry Chow had shared. She couldn't believe or understand how her cousin could commit such a cruel and horrific act. Henry Chow's attitude as he recounted the story left Seo In-kun deeply disappointed. As he described how he killed his parents, he seemed disturbingly proud. He even boasted that no one noticed him, and no one smelled anything when he disposed of the bodies. Henry Chow appeared to feel very pleased with his achievement and showed no remorse at all. On March 15, 2013, after receiving a report from Seo In-kun, the police arrived at a residential building in the Western District at 7 a.m. the next day to arrest Henry Chow on suspicion of obstructing a lawful burial. Under police questioning, Henry Chow finally admitted the truth. "I killed my parents." He also revealed the crime scene location and identified his accomplice. Based on Henry Chow's information, at around 10:30 a.m., the police arrived at Hoi Ying Building, located at 32-44 Phuoc Street in Tai Kok Sway. On the 3rd floor, they found Henry Chow's accomplice, Angus Tse Chun K, 35, nicknamed Ake, as Henry had previously mentioned. The police arrested Angus Tse Chun K on suspicion of obstructing a lawful burial. When the police opened the door to the 3rd floor apartment, they were hit by a strong stench mixed with the smell of bleach and air conditioning. Let's take a look at the layout of the apartment. Upon entering, there was a long hallway. To the right were the kitchen and bathroom. Continuing down the hall, there was a storage room on the right, which contained 2 refrigerators, 2 microwaves, and some miscellaneous items. At the end of the hall was the living room, with 2 bedrooms facing the living area. In the corner of the 2nd bedroom and the living room, the police found numerous bottles of bleach, buckets, a cement trolley, rice cookers, plastic wrap, and over 600 foam containers. The scene resembled a food processing workshop. Under the bed in the master bedroom, police found a handwritten murder plan by Henry Chow detailing his plan to kill his parents. He had also intended to store the bags containing body parts in the refrigerator. In the 2nd bedroom on a bloodstained table, they found a brand new cutting board with some minced meat on it. Beneath the table was a severed arm. A knife and a saw were also found in a red plastic bucket. Next to the table, there were 2 refrigerators in the storage room between the bathroom and the second bedroom. The refrigerator doors were covered with a layer of clear plastic wrap, and a light red liquid was seeping along the edges of the wrap. A severed head was found on top of the 2 refrigerators, along with foam meal containers filled with cooked meat and organs wrapped in plastic bags. Also found in the room were 3 large plastic bins and tools used for the crime, including a total of 7 sharp knives, 1 kitchen knife, 2 cleavers for new knives, a hacksaw, and 2 saw blades, one of which was broken in half. At the scene, the police discovered the decomposing bodies of 2 individuals identified as Henry Chow's parents. He had murdered them and carried out all these acts against his own parents. He wrapped them in plastic bags and foam containers, then stored them in the refrigerators and large plastic bins. This method was extremely cruel and heartless. Finally, the truth behind the case began to surface. The perpetrator, 29-year-old Henry Chow, came from a family of 4. He was unemployed, enjoyed stock speculation, and relied on luck-based activities for his livelihood. Henry's parents had raised him with care since he was young. They spared no expense, even paying for his piano lessons until he reached a professional level. Although Henry was quite skilled at playing the piano, he didn't like it at all. His academic performance in school was also average, so his parents sent him to Australia for higher education, hoping to improve his prospects. While studying in Australia, Henry often faced discrimination because of his short stature. He was even pushed to the ground and beaten at times. This experience of mistreatment during his studies left a significant scar on his life, though he never discussed it with his family. In 2003, at the age of 19, Henry Chow returned to Hong Kong, but his personality had changed considerably. He was no longer the well-behaved, polite, and respectful child he once was. After his return, he frequently argued with his parents. Henry stated, "My parents put immense pressure on me. They forced me to learn piano from a young age, and wouldn't let me pursue activities I enjoyed. Every time I needed to study for exams, my dad would either be at home watching soccer or playing piano, and all that noise made it impossible for me to concentrate on my studies." Henry had long harbored resentment toward his parents. He believed they deprived him of the chance to play sports as a child, which he blamed for his short stature. Henry once confided in friends, saying, "I've been through many failed relationships. One woman even had my child and gave birth to a daughter, but after the baby was born, both mother and child disappeared, and I could never find them." Frustrated by his failed relationships, he felt that his short stature was the reason all his girlfriends left him. Henry blamed his parents for his career and romantic struggles, believing they were at the root of all his problems. After returning to Hong Kong from Australia, Henry Chow tried various jobs, such as working at a bank and in a real estate company, but he couldn't succeed in any of them. He constantly felt that his bosses were picking on him, or that his coworkers were bullying him. Over time, he quit working and stayed at home, spending his days doing nothing but indulging in a careless lifestyle. At home, Henry Chow turned to unhealthy habits, seeking satisfaction in the virtual world. He even recorded explicit videos of himself and uploaded them online to attract customers. In these videos, he introduced himself in English and demonstrated his skill of drawing circles freehand. Henry often dreamed of becoming wealthy, so he invested heavily in stocks, hoping to strike it rich overnight. However, he consistently lost money, and his parents had to bail him out multiple times. Once, his parents even sold a house to help pay off his debts. After paying off everything, the remaining money was divided between the 2 brothers, with each receiving 500,000 Hong Kong dollars, about $64,000. But as soon as Henry Chow received his share, he went back to investing in the stock market. By 2013, Henry had once again lost a large sum of money. He asked his parents to pay off his debts, and pleaded with them to sell their assets and divide the proceeds among their children. Disappointed by their son's repeated failures, his parents refused and insisted that he should work to pay off his debts himself. Additionally, they feared he might sell the property under his name at a low price to clear his debts, so they asked him to transfer the ownership of the house to his brother, Chow Hoi Ing. Henry Chow didn't understand his parents' intentions. He felt they were taking everything that belonged to him. Losing the house was a severe blow to him, leaving him in utter despair. Henry confided in his friend Angus Say about his desperate thoughts. Unexpectedly, after hearing his story, Angus Tse responded, "This is all your parents' fault. You're in this situation because of them. The ones who should die are your parents, not you." Angus Tse then persuaded Henry to abandon his initial plan, and instead suggested that he take action against his parents. Henry claimed that Angus told him. Tempted by Angus Tse's encouragement, Henry ultimately gave in. The two began discussing how they could kill his parents without making any noise. On February 27, 2013, 2 days before the incident, supermarket surveillance cameras captured Henry Chow and Angus Tsai buying several knives. In the footage, Angus Tsai is seen paying for the items at the checkout counter, while Henry Chow stood at a distance, watching carefully and cautiously. On the day of the crime, March 1, 2013, Henry Chow and Angus Tsai had prepared all the tools needed to commit the act. Henry told his parents, "I'm planning to move out and rent an apartment with a friend at Hoi Hing Building in Tai Kok Sui. I'd like you to come help me move my things." His parents felt relieved and happy, glad to see that their son was making positive changes. At 11:19 a.m. that day, prompted by their son's sincere request, the couple arrived at Hoi Hing Building. 20 minutes later, Henry Chow was seen with his parents outside the building's elevator. Surveillance footage captured the three of them entering the elevator and going to an apartment on the 3rd floor at 11:40 a.m. As Henry opened the door, his mother, Moon Tseo, entered first, followed by her husband and son. However, before she could even see her son's new place, she was ambushed by a man hiding behind the door. As they entered the apartment, Angus Tse suddenly jumped out from behind the door and attacked Moon Tseo from behind. He stabbed her in the neck with a knife, then struck multiple times in her abdomen and back, killing her instantly before she could react. At that moment, her husband, Glory Chow, realized something was terribly wrong. Witnessing the brutal murder of his wife, he tried to escape with his son, only to find Henry standing in front of him with a menacing expression. Henry Chow attempted to attack his father with a knife, but Glory Chow was prepared. Henry, standing at 5 feet 5 inches, was no match for his father. The two were locked in a struggle. Just then, Angus Tse intervened, holding Glory down. Glory used all his strength to fight back, but was ultimately overpowered. He was stabbed multiple times in the back, thrown forcefully to the ground, and even strangled by Angus. The entire incident happened very quickly. During the struggle, Henry Chow accidentally injured his leg, so he left the apartment alone to seek medical treatment at a hospital. At 4:19 p.m., hospital surveillance cameras captured his appearance. At 4:39 p.m., he was seen in a nearby clothing store, purchasing a pair of pants to replace his blood-stained ones. Afterward, he returned to the scene. When he got back, he saw Angus Tse dismembering the bodies and wrapping certain body parts in plastic bags. The two men then drove to the beach and threw part of the remains into the sea. Later, Henry Chow falsely reported that his parents had disappeared during a trip until he was eventually arrested by the police. The accomplice, Angus Tse, aged 35 and 6 years older than Henry Chow, came from an ordinary family. He was the second child with an older sister. Angus' father was from Macau. When Angus was 3, his mother discovered her husband's infidelity, leading to their divorce. After the divorce, his mother worked multiple jobs, sometimes 2 at a time, to support her 2 children. With her busy work schedule, Angus fell to his sister, Aim, who was 2 years older. From a young age, Angus Tse struggled academically. Falling behind his classmates, he had to change schools repeatedly. Beyond academic troubles, he was often bullied at school, even physically assaulted and sprayed with insecticide by some classmates. Yet, he endured it all in silence, without retaliation. After high school, Angus started working various jobs, such as an accountant, secretary, and security guard, but none lasted long. He had no dating experience, and his love life and career were both unstable. In 2008, while working in New Zealand, he started dating a woman who turned out to be manipulative, leaving him in debt. Heartbroken, he returned to Hong Kong, and in despair over the breakup, attempted suicide by consuming rat poison and mercury. Fortunately, his sister discovered him in time, but the attempt left lingering effects. His intelligence and memory suffered, and he frequently experienced memory lapses. A few years later, Angus met an Indonesian woman through a friend, and they got married. However, he soon discovered that his wife had only married him to gain residency in Hong Kong. She had a husband back in Indonesia, and even a boyfriend. Angus wasn't even considered a part of her life. At his lowest, he met Henry Chow. The two met at a job interview and became close friends. Angus trusted Henry deeply, feeling that he treated him well by frequently taking him out for food and entertainment. After their arrest, however, Angus gave a completely different confession than Henry Chow. He claimed had nothing to do with the crime. On the day of incident, I came back home very late. When I returned, I found Henry Chow murdering his family members. I was terrified and wanted to leave, but Henry Chow threatened me by bringing up my mother and sister, forcing me to help him dispose of the bodies. I had no choice but to follow Henry Chow's instructions. On August 4th, 6 months after the incident, the case went to trial at the Hong Kong High Court. The defendants, Henry Chow and Angus Tsai, faced charges of murder and obstructing a lawful burial. In court, a jury of 7 members was present. However, during the trial on August 7th, one juror requested to withdraw, citing psychological distress from the nature of the case, reducing the jury to 6. Shortly after, another juror also filed to withdraw, stating that the details of the case were deeply disturbing. Judge Seaman Min announced the jury would proceed with 5 members. On August 13, 2014, a new jury was selected and a new trial date was set. 2 years after the crime, on February 23rd, the case reopened at the Hong Kong High Court, this time with a jury of 9. In the opening statement, the prosecutor described the case as a sequence of events. The victims had been dismembered, salted, frozen, and microwaved, making it difficult for forensic experts to determine the exact time of death. According to Henry Chow's testimony, it was Angus Tsai who suggested these actions. Henry Chow's defense attorney called 2 psychiatrists to testify. One psychiatrist believed that Henry Chow's varied behaviors indicated he suffered from obsessive-compulsive disorder and bipolar disorder, stemming from his academic struggles, introverted personality, rejection by women, and unemployment. Psychological consultants from the Mental Health Center conducted IQ tests on both defendants. Henry Chow's IQ was found to be high at 126, while Angus Tsai's IQ was 84. Given these results, it was argued that Henry Chow, with a higher IQ, might have manipulated or implicated Angus Tsai in the murder. On March 23, 2015, after a month-long trial, the jury deliberated and delivered their final verdict. Henry Chow was found guilty by a vote of 8-1, while Angus Tsai was acquitted of murder by a unanimous vote of 9-0. However, Angus Tsai was convicted of obstructing a lawful burial. The court sentenced Henry Chow to life imprisonment for 2 counts of murder. Angus Tsai, though acquitted of murder, was sentenced to 1 year in prison for obstructing a lawful burial. Since Angus Tsai had already been in custody awaiting trial for nearly 2 years, he was released immediately. The case sent shockwaves through Hong Kong. Judge C. Min remarked that Henry Chow was an exceptionally dangerous criminal and highly skilled at deception. In 2022, the film The Sparring Partner, based on this case, was released, bringing the case back into the public eye and making it more notorious than ever. To this day, there are still varying opinions about the truth behind the entire case. Some believe that Angus Tsai should be held accountable as he was involved in the murder process, while others think Henry Chow was the sole killer. Perhaps only the two of them truly know the full truth. As you can see, raising children with a liberal approach is quite rare in Hong Kong, as it's often seen as neglectful. In Chinese culture, traditional parenting is typically strict and closely monitored. Supporters of strict parenting believe that parents shouldn't deny or pretend that a child's performance doesn't matter. They argue that consistently setting high expectations can motivate children to improve. While this may be true, the perfectionist approach many Chinese parents take in raising their children can sometimes push a child to the edge.